Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is part 4 of an emperor's youth. Gifted with a rare bloodline, incredible instincts for taijutsu, and guided by an unpredictable teacher, Naruto begins his shinobi career far earlier than anyone expected. But growing stronger also means seeing the world more clearly. Determined to live life on his own terms, Naruto begins to question what it truly means to be a shinobi of Konoha. With every mission and every battle, the distance between him and the village seems to grow. Will Naruto find his place among the shinobi of the leaf? Or will the very village he protects push him away forever? This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Red Ninja Last 19, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to the story is included in the video description below. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 19. Sakura jogged her way to her team's meeting point, shoving the pastry she'd picked up on the way out that morning into her mouth. It was weird to think that only a couple of weeks before she'd have fainted at the thought. She hadn't allowed herself something so high-carb in a long time, but after yesterday, she knew she had to make some changes. She'd been forcing herself to eat more since she started training for real. It hadn't been enough since she'd been forced to miss the farming D rank yesterday due to illness. Her family doctor had said she'd exhausted herself and need to either increase her calorie intake or cut down on the training. Losing time on training wasn't an option, so Sakura had agreed to snack throughout the day on top of her meals. It wasn't easy. Every bite she took felt like it was converting itself to fat, and she hadn't been able to stop checking her body in the mirror every day to make sure she wasn't becoming flabby. She knew it was a habit she had to break. She had to stop thinking of her body in terms of how skinny it could be and instead about how strong it was. If she had to put on weight to get stronger, that was what she would have to do. She knew that it would take a long time to train herself out of thinking like that. It was hard to break habits built over years. Being a kunoichi was a lot harder than she'd ever imagined. She'd thought she'd been ready when she graduated from the academy, but her team had given her a hell of a wake-up call. Sasuke-kun thought she was weak, and Naruto didn't even think she was worth the time of day. She could tell that even Kakashi-sensei thought she was the weakest in the team. She didn't like it. She'd graduated at the top of her class in the academy, and she'd held that position with pride. She'd left that team meeting at first not knowing what she was going to do, overwhelmed by the negative thoughts crowding her mind. She slowly realized over the course of that day that she needed to show them that they were wrong about her, but it wasn't until she'd started training to show them all just how wrong they were about her that she realized that they were right. She was the weakest in the team. She struggled with exercises that Naruto and Sasuke could do without breaking a sweat. It was embarrassing. She'd been too ashamed to even greet Sasuke-kun in the mornings, and she avoided speaking to either of them. She just couldn't face them, knowing they were right. She hadn't a clue what being a kunoichi meant, and she'd taken the career so lightly. She had vowed to change things and become a team member that Sasuke-kun could respect. So he would look at her and see an equal he could fall in love with. It had taken him talking about her like that, but Sakura had finally realized that her looks didn't matter to Sasuke. He only cared about her strength and skill. It was mortifying to know that she had been focused on all the wrong things, but it wasn't too late. She may not have perfect hair or skin or clothes, but if she could show that she was strong, that she was working hard and could contribute to the team, then that would be enough for Sasuke to look at her and see someone who could support him. She didn't like Naruto, but she did want him to acknowledge her too. It was really hard. She was exhausted and her legs hurt, and she had cuts all over her hands, and she felt like she would never be clean again. She often wondered what she could have been able to do if she had started earlier, but that didn't help her now. She was learning that while getting fitter was a physical matter, it was more of a mental battle. She felt like stopping so many times and catching her breath, but she pushed herself to go that bit further, and she always managed to do it. She could do this. Kakashi-sensei had given her a real training menu to follow, and she diligently completed it every day, adding extra runs where she could. She was going to start looking into ways to improve her taijutsu next. It was what she saw Sasuke-kun practicing the most, so she figured that should be her next focus. The academy had put them through katas and spars a lot in their final years, but wasn't anything like what she saw Naruto and Sasuke-kun doing. They were way faster and hit way harder, and she didn't know how to achieve that. She should pay another visit to the library. Forehead? She stopped, looking over to the familiar voice. She hadn't realized she was passing Ino's family's flower shop, too lost in her thoughts. The other girl was standing out front, a basket of flowers in her hands. She was still as beautiful as when she'd last seen her. Long, silky blonde hair, clear skin, large pale blue eyes. A figure Sakura would kill for. She'd always been jealous of the way Ino looked. It was so unfair that she was just born like that. Ino pig, she called back automatically. What happened? Ino walked toward her and Sakura could see real concern in her eyes. You're a mess. I've been training, Sakura shrugged, biting and swallowing the last piece of pastry. You're on a team with Sasuke-kun. Ino scowled. You're not going to win his heart looking like that. Do you have any idea how many calories that pastry has? Have you given up? She smirked. Are you finally admitting defeat to me? Sakura looked at her for a long moment. In the academy, Ino had been her ultimate rival. She couldn't count the number of arguments and contests they'd had in an effort to prove themselves the better partner for Sasuke-kun. Sasuke-kun hadn't once acknowledged them, and Sakura had attributed it to the aloof, mysterious aura that made Sasuke-kun so cool. Now she had spent a couple of weeks with him, seeing how he interacted with Naruto. It was so pathetically easy to see he truly hadn't cared. All those challenges, losing Ino as her best friend, it hadn't mattered. I just realized that I need to grow up, she replied, ignoring the bait. I'm a kunoichi now. Having perfect hair and makeup won't be any use on a mission if I can't back it up with real skills. Ino shot her a strange look. What happened to you? She demanded. This isn't you. Sasuke-kun isn't so shallow that those things matter to him. Sakura met her gaze confidently. He cares about strength, so I'm going to become strong. Not just for Sasuke-kun's sake, but mine too. She never wanted to feel like she had the day after the bell test ever again. She wasn't okay with being the weakest, but she could live with it as long as she knew she was working to change it. There were a lot of things outside of her control, but this wasn't one of them. We're not academy students anymore, Ino, she said, shaking her head. We're kunoichi. We need to start taking that seriously. I haven't given up on Sasuke-kun, but I now know there's a lot of other stuff I need to focus on. Sasuke-kun isn't going anywhere, and if I want him to look at me, I need to prove I'm strong enough to stand by his side. She looked up, cursing at the time. Sorry Ino, I have to go. She didn't wait for the blonde girl's reply as she resumed her jog. She had to hurry, she couldn't arrive later than Kakashi-sensei. Naruto tapped his foot as Kakashi explained the training exercise. The Junin had been 4 hours late this time, and while it had given Naruto extra time to work on his kenjutsu, it also delayed his plans for the rest of the day. He carried out most of his training outside of Team 7 hours, and this was taking a good chunk of time out of it. I am not doing that. All eyes turned to him. Naruto, this is not optional. This is ridiculous. He threw up his hands. I'm not doing it. It is just a training exercise. Kakashi tried to appease him, but Naruto would not be swayed. For newly graduated genin, he pointed out. I did this on my own like 3 years ago. This exercise isn't meant to be done alone. Naruto crossed his arms, glaring at Kakashi. He was not about to waste his morning doing a damn obstacle course. He was not opposed to the concept, but this particular course was a permanent fixture in Training Ground 2, and it was purpose-built for newly graduated genin to get used to traveling through terrain. They had the occasional survival trip in the academy, but that was more to learn the essential of camping than anything else. They wouldn't know the tree walking technique at this point, so it was an appropriate level of difficulty for them. Naruto had C-rank guard patrols that were more difficult than that course. It would be way too easy for Sasuke too. You've never done it tied to other genin. Yeah, because I don't need to be, Naruto shook his head. That course is meant to simulate traveling on missions. I don't know why the fuck I would be tied to my teammates on a mission. It's a team training exercise, Kakashi emphasized. Something you need a significant amount of work on. It's a waste of time. I know I can do it, Sasuke can do it. It would only be Sakura, and I ain't spending 2 hours getting dragged down by someone who can't pull herself up a wall. And if you were attached to Sakura by a rope and she fell, what would you do? Cut the rope, Naruto said as if it was obvious because it was. And Sasuke? Cut the rope. Naruto, you are on a team. You cannot just abandon your teammates whenever you feel like it. They should be able to look after themselves. If I cut the rope, I believe they will be able to save themselves. How is that being a bad teammate? And what if they didn't? What if they died? Naruto felt something twist in gut at the thought of losing Sasuke, but he squashed it. It didn't matter, it wasn't going to happen because Sasuke could handle his shit. He could see that there was something more to this for Kakashi, but Naruto wasn't going to compromise his training for whatever emotional baggage Kakashi was lugging around. It wouldn't be my fault that they can't look after themselves. Kakashi's eye twitched and Naruto could see his gray eye darkened in anger. He was really pissed off, but guess what, so was Naruto. This shit had been coming since they were placed on the same team. Their ideals were too different. What if it was you? They cut the rope on you? Good, I would figure it out. I ain't special. I don't expect to be treated any different. Kakashi sighed heavily. What do you want me to do? Carry her through the whole course? No, go at the slowest person's pace and assist each other. Like a goddamn team. I don't see how that is any different than carrying her through the fucker. Naruto. Kakashi yelled and Naruto could tell he was reaching his limit. He was quite impressed with himself. Kakashi was hard to ruffle on a good day and he'd been dealing with Naruto for years. He couldn't get this kind of reaction out of him often, but he found he couldn't even enjoy it. When are you going to get it through your thick skull that you are a part of this team? Something in Naruto snapped. You think I don't know that? He spat. I know I'm stuck on this goddamn team. I turn up for training, I go on the stupid D ranks, I meet every single fucking obligation that is attached to this fucking team, but is that good enough for you? No. It's all, Naruto, be nice to your teammates, or, Naruto, slow down, or, Naruto, hold yourself back for their sake. I didn't ask for this. I wanted to stay with Guy-sensei. Sasuke and Sakura had vanished from his view and all he could see was Kakashi as he released all the rage that had been building up for the past couple of weeks. I am being forced on missions that are well below my skill level and training that doesn't even challenge me. The fucking Hokage decided that I should be put on this team because I can't be nice to civilians who hate my fucking guts and would kill me given half a chance. People from my class are fucking chunin. I'm not even allowed to sit the exam. And yet, I suck it up. I turn up every goddamn day and suffer through whatever half-assed training you offer because you can't be bothered to turn up. He felt like he'd stalled, like he was stuck while the world moved around him. He had been a genin for so long and it was stifling. He was sick of seeing the people around him move forward when he was forced to stay still through no choice of his own. What was even worse is that not only could he not move forward, he had been being forced backwards ever since joining this team. Why do I always have to be one to bend? It's not my fault I graduated early. I am doing my absolute fucking best to put up with shit and do productive training in my own time, but you go on and on about teamwork and depending on each other and making each other better, but that doesn't fucking apply here because I can't depend on anyone. Sakura is too weak and you're too busy trying to make us work together than to actually look and see what the fuck is going wrong. He used to be able to do what he wanted. He hadn't trained with Guy-sensei every day, but he could do C ranks that challenged him and training that he actually liked and generally exist in peace. At least on C ranks he could occasionally leave the village. He didn't just lose Guy-sensei but all of that too. Nobody seemed to get that. They just assumed he was being rude and difficult because he was an asshole and not because he hated absolutely everything about his situation. That was the truth of it, he hated his life right now. He hated that he couldn't take the Chunin exams. He hated that he lost Guy-sensei. He hated that no matter how much he avoided them the villagers still blamed him for shit that wasn't his fault. He hated that he'd lost his freedom. He hated that his choices had been taken away from him. He hated that no one would even acknowledge that fact he was fucking trying. If he really wanted to, he could miss every team meeting and mission and do his own thing. He would be punished by the Hokage, but that wasn't anything new. Fuck, he could leave the village. He wouldn't get far without the Anbu catching him. He knew that from when he'd tried when he was younger, but he could figure it out. He was a lot stronger than he had been when he was 4. He'd only decided to try and leave the village the legal ways when all of his attempts failed. I don't even know why I try, he threw up his hands. This is Naruto just being difficult, right? I'm the asshole who refuses to work in a team because I'm evil and horrible and difficult. Everything is my fault, right? Just ask the fucking villagers. I can't do anything right." He stopped, his chest heaving and his mouth dry as the silence weighed on the surroundings. He hadn't meant to say that much. Fuck, he didn't want to deal with this. Fuck this. Fuck everything. I'm outta here. He turned and ran from the training ground. No one called him back. Kakashi slumped further into the branch, the quiet rustling of leaves washing over him. He was pathetic. He was a terrible teacher and Minato-sensei would be so disappointed in him. How had he managed to get everything so wrong? He knew Naruto had his issues with teamwork and it had been something that Kakashi wanted to try and address. When he looked at Naruto, he saw himself before Obito died. He'd also been against having a team and he'd cared more about his own training and missions than he did Obito and Rin. He just didn't want Naruto to have to learn the lessons the hard way, like he did. There wasn't a day that went by when Kakashi didn't regret his actions and the attitude that led to the loss of his team. He didn't want it to break Naruto like it broke him. He hadn't really tried when Naruto was just his ninjutsu student. He hadn't wanted to overstep and Guy was doing a great job with him. He'd seen the changes in Naruto over his time as Guy's student and while it wasn't all the way there, it had been leaps and bounds from the first day. When he'd been reassigned to Kakashi, he knew it was a chance to try and show the kid that having a team was a good thing. That they could support each other, help each other improve, that he could have allies to fall back on. It was a stroke of luck that he and Sasuke not only already knew each other but actually seemed to get along. He still didn't know how that had happened. He knew Sakura was one of the problems here. She was so far behind the boys and her attitude at first had been problematic. While he did not agree with the way it was done, he could already see the changes in Sakura. She was putting a lot more effort in and seemed less focused on Sasuke. She still wasn't ready for a C rank but she was at least now heading in the right direction. Part of it wasn't her fault, she was from a civilian family. The only exposure she'd had to being a kunoichi was through the academy and that was a tame, sanitized version to what the reality was. But was it really fair to hold the other two back for her sake? Naruto's words had been bothering him since their argument this morning and he knew deep down that the kid was right. Kakashi hadn't acknowledged how hard everything had been for him and hadn't appreciated that Naruto really was trying in his own way. He hadn't missed a mission or training session even if his attitude towards Sakura still fell short. It wasn't what Kakashi had wanted from him but that didn't change the fact that Naruto was making the effort. He'd seen the way the kid responded to other Junin he didn't like and Naruto didn't act that way with him. It was certainly not to the levels of admiration and respect he held for Guy but Naruto did respect Kakashi, in his own way. He'd probably screwed all that up now, hadn't he? Naruto was right. It was unfair of Kakashi to ask him to slow down for his teammates. It was for the good of the team but to the detriment of Naruto. That wasn't fair. Naruto's wasn't willing to slow down and support his teammates, which had been Kakashi's main issue with him, but also hadn't seen things from Naruto's point of view. He couldn't rely on his teammates either since they were not strong enough yet and why would Naruto allow them to rely on him if he couldn't do the same? Sasuke was advanced for a genin fresh out of the academy, even if he wasn't quite on the same level as Naruto yet, but he was still getting used to being a genin. And yet he couldn't throw Sakura and Sasuke into the deep end. That was a surefire way of getting them killed. He dropped his head back onto the tree trunk. How was he going to do this? He had to change the way he was doing things and try to be better, but how was he going to do that? All his genin were at different levels and they all needed different things and working as a real team would be impossible until they were all at more similar levels. Did he abandon team training to focus on them individually? Would that be better for them as a team in the long run? How would that help them be a team though? It would put them on a level footing so they could work better on missions and team exercises but would it make a difference to Naruto's viewpoint? He knew Naruto would still cut the rope even if they stronger so that didn't help the whole, try and get Naruto to see that teams are a good thing, plan. And even if he trained them at levels appropriate for them, they would never get to similar levels as Naruto would keep improving. Sakura would never catch up. He was at a loss. He didn't know what he was going to do. All he did know was that things had to change. He couldn't drive Naruto away any further and as it was, he didn't know if he would be able to repair the damage already done. Why did he think he would be a good Junin sensei for them? He was a complete failure. He had failed his own genin team and now he was failing his students. He knew he hadn't put as much effort into being a Junin sensei as he could have. He felt like if he actually tried, he would just screw things up even further. He wanted to be a good teacher like Minato sensei, but he felt stuck. He hated not knowing what to do and he didn't want to make the wrong choices. It was a bit late for that though, apparently he'd already been making all the wrong choices. He needed to figure something out. He may be a failure but these kids were his responsibility. It was time to stop running from that. He may make the wrong decisions but he was doing that now, the worst had already happened. His fears were already becoming reality. How could he make things worse than what they already were? Things couldn't stay the way they were and Kakashi vowed then and there to change. He didn't know how yet but his team deserved better. Naruto deserved better. Naruto slammed the window shut, cursing the old bag beneath his breath. She'd made another ploy to kick him out and he was so fucking fed up with it. He paid his rent, he didn't make any noise, he kept his trash tidy, and he even cleaned the place. What more did she want from him? He had seen places kept in worse conditions during his D ranks and yet they didn't have their landlady trying to kick them out at any given opportunity. She'd said he was bad for business and he had noticed that the apartments on his floor never stayed full for long, but he knew that had more to do with the building's tendency to lack hot water and electricity for days on end. He didn't even use his front door so no one would even see him in the corridor. He knew the Kyuubi had killed her only son in the attack but that didn't have anything to do with him. He took a breath of the crisp morning air, taking a moment to appreciate the quiet. He could almost imagine the village was completely empty. He didn't let himself linger for long, making his way across the rooftops. He would not be attending the training for Team 7 today so he had to find somewhere Kakashi and Sasuke wouldn't think to look for him. Unfortunately, the pair of them knew him a little too well for his liking, although it was still nowhere near to the extent of Gai-sensei. He hopped down to the ground in one of the side alleys, heading out to the Hokage mountain. He had never been there with either of them so it should be safe. He shoved his hands into his pockets, glaring at the ground as he walked through the empty streets. He wasn't sure what to do here. He'd said his piece and he'd meant every word but that didn't actually change the situation. The Chunin exams were only a few months away but he had no guarantee that Kakashi would offer up the other two to sit it with him, saying dumb shit like they weren't ready or something. He didn't think he could wait another year. He couldn't spend another year pissing his hard work up the wall just because the people around him were useless. Maybe it was time to consider leaving. He was much stronger than he was during his last attempt and if he picked the right time and disguise, he could probably do it. He could leave one of his clones here to buy him some time too. He didn't know what he would do when he actually left but he was sure he would figure it out. He could just go after bounties or something. He walked up to the cliff face and looked up in the cold, stone faces of previous Hokage. He didn't feel a connection to them, not like everyone else seemed to. The only things he would be leaving behind really was Sasuke, Kakashi, Hayate, Gai-sensei and Ichiraku Ramen. Sasuke, Kakashi and Hayate would be totally fine without him and Gai-sensei had his new team to worry about. He would miss Ichiraku Ramen but there was bound to be other ramen out there. He could spend some of his free time finding one just as good. Naruto-kun. Naruto jumped out of his skin and snapped around to stare at a grinning Gai-sensei. He hadn't changed from the last time he'd seen him. A perfectly symmetrical bowl cut, shining white teeth and skin-tight green spandex. He quickly looked around but couldn't see any of his genin team. "Hi, Gai-sensei. Are you here to train, Naruto-kun?" Gai-sensei grinned brightly. "You were always a most diligent student." "Yeah," Naruto agreed, not mentioning that he was here mainly to avoid people. Training was just a side benefit. "You too? I am challenging myself to climb this mountain with one hand." Gai-sensei laughed. "Kakashi and I had a challenge to do so and I lost to my rival, so I must train to address my shortcomings." Naruto personally couldn't imagine Kakashi having the motivation to do that much physical labor. His happiness at seeing Gai-sensei dimmed at the thought of his new Junin sensei. "Is everything alright, Naruto-kun?" His head snapped up to stare at Gai-sensei. Was he that obvious? Gai-sensei had always been a little too good at reading him. "Yeah, Gai-sensei," he brushed it off. "Are we going to climb this or what?" Gai-sensei immediately lit up and Naruto blinked at his blinding smile. "You are flourishing in your springtime of youth, Naruto-kun. How wonderful that you would join my training. Naruto couldn't hide his small smile at the man's antics. It was a breath of fresh air after the last couple of weeks. He needed this. He needed the uncomplicated approach that Guy-sensei had. A spoon was a spoon with Guy-sensei, and he would never hold back with his students. He would only encourage them to try harder. Race you to the top? He offered. Guy-sensei laughed. Of course, Naruto-kun. Naruto faced the wall and readied himself, thoughts of Team 7 shoved to the back of his mind. He would need his full concentration for this, and for the first time since he'd left Guy-sensei's tutelage, he felt like he was actually doing something. He would think back on his plans to leave later, but for now, he would soak in the challenge and thrill that came with being Guy-sensei's student, if only for a short time. Chapter 20. Sasuke flung the blanket off him and stomped to the front door, vowing to murder the asshole who dared knock incessantly at his door at this goddamn time of the morning. He'd never had visitors and didn't want to start now. He'd already had a shit week. D ranks were every bit as awful as Naruto had always said they were, and after the blonde's blow-up at Kakashi, he'd been nowhere to be found, so Sasuke had been forced to suffer the team on his own. He had not liked it. He would never admit it aloud, but training was better with Naruto there. If Sasuke was going to choose anyone in this village to get stuck with, it was Naruto, so the fact the blonde had ghosted them all had put Sasuke in a foul mood. He swung the door open with growl, only to see the bane of his life standing there. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Dramatic much? Sasuke slammed the door in his stupid face. The knocking started back up again, and Sasuke stood in the darkness of his apartment, debating the merits of murdering his teammate. The moron ignored him all week and then turned up at his apartment in the middle of the damn night and called him dramatic? Come on, Sasuke. Let me in. Sasuke turned and dragged the door back open against his better judgment. Naruto barged in before he had the chance to speak, apparently unwilling to risk Sasuke slamming the door on him again. What the fuck, Dobi? It was then he noticed the packed duffel bag that Naruto had dumped on the ground. He met Naruto's eyes and hoped the blonde could read the murder in his eyes. Just hear me out. Naruto threw up his hands. Let me crash here for a couple days. And why the fuck would I do that? How much do you want the Kaiten jutsu I promised? The super high-level forbidden ones that I may or may not have tracked down after Kakashi told me, no, that one time? Sasuke glared at him. He hated that Naruto knew him a little too well. The idiot wouldn't even use the jutsu himself, so why would he go looking for them? I want all of them. Naruto grinned back at him, and Sasuke just continued glaring. Where the hell have you been? Naruto dumped his bag on the couch and proceeded to melt into Sasuke's couch. He was immune to Sasuke's glares, so he kicked the dobi for good measure. Come on, Sasuke, it's the middle of the night. Naruto groaned, flopping his head back. Can't we do this in the morning? Sasuke was this close to throwing him out the window. You're the one who turned up at my apartment in the middle of the fucking night, dobi, so you will answer or you will be sleeping in the forest of death. It wasn't like Sasuke would be getting back to sleep anytime soon. One blue eye opened and glared back at him. With a huff, Naruto straightened up and propped his chin on his hand while Sasuke crossed his arms, glaring expectantly. My landlady kicked me out, he said, rolling his eyes. Why? Because I'm me, Naruto spat bitterly. What other reason does she need? Sasuke frowned. He'd never understood what the villagers had against Naruto. He was an asshole and Sasuke frequently wished to smash his face into a tree, but he wasn't a bad person. As much as he annoyed Sasuke, he was also the only one Sasuke could trust to be straight with him and see him not for his Uchiha status, but as Sasuke. Naruto was an asshole, but Sasuke liked that about him, not that he'd ever tell the dumbass. He always met Sasuke blow for blow and never took it easy on him. He'd never seen anything that justified Naruto's treatment by the village. Naruto also went out of his way to avoid any and all villagers, so he wasn't sure what they had against him. That's shit, he replied, not sure what else there was to say. Naruto huffed a laugh, staring at the ceiling. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Alarm bells started ringing in Sasuke's head and he leaned forward abruptly. What? Naruto looked at him and laughed. I'm not going to off myself, he chuckled, although the sound was hollow. That would mean Konoha wins and I would burn down the village before I let them win. Sasuke leaned back slowly. He was more than familiar with Naruto's sentiments about Konoha, but he'd never heard the blonde sound so serious about it before. Would you hold it against me if I left? Sasuke blinked. Where the hell did that come from? I'm leaving, Naruto announced, as if he was talking about the forecast. Not tonight, but soon. Sasuke wished he could be more surprised by the sentiment, but it made a lot of sense. Naruto wasn't happy here, and his response to conflict with people was to run. The fight with Kakashi might have pushed him too far. Okay. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Nothing to say? What is there to say? Sasuke shrugged, dumping himself into one of his armchairs. You're the most stubborn mule I know, so if you've decided to go, you'll go. You get why, right? Sasuke shrugged again. Would you ever leave? Why would I do that? You're not going to beat Itachi by staying in the village. Sasuke snapped towards his teammate, a snarl in his throat. What the fuck did he know about Itachi? Itachi had been Anbu. He gotten strong in the village, so why wouldn't Sasuke? Naruto put his hands up in a placating gesture. I'm not saying you can't kill him, I'm just asking if you're sure you're going to get strong enough here, with Team 7, he continued, dropping his hands. Itachi was Anbu, sure, but the village is holding you back to the same level as your peers, not your actual abilities. They did it with me too. You weren't allowed to graduate early, right? Sasuke was about to snap something back, but he stopped, considering. Kakashi-sensei had been better with training since the fight with Naruto, but it was still nowhere near what Sasuke wanted. He trained until he bled when he came home at night, and if it wasn't for Naruto bribing him with powerful jutsu in the academy, he would be severely lacking in those too. Kakashi-sensei has been better about training recently. How would leaving the village benefit me? Naruto grinned, light entering his eyes for the first time since he'd barged his way into Sasuke's apartment. It's a big world out there, Sasuke. I've seen it on C ranks. We could do whatever we wanted out there and no one would be able to hold us back. We'd have to disguise ourselves for a while, but we could collect bounties or something. Sasuke didn't know. Naruto had made some good points, but he didn't know if leaving the village would make him any stronger. Here he had teachers and access to jutsu, but outside the village, he would have nothing. Look, I just wanted to mention it. Naruto looked away. You're way better than this village, Sasuke. You don't owe them anything. That was the closest Naruto had ever come to a real compliment, although considering how he felt about Konoha, it wasn't exactly a high bar. I'm not going anywhere, for now, he answered. When are you planning on leaving? Our first C rank, Naruto replied immediately. He must have been thinking about this for a while. We always leave the village for that one, and there has got to be some chance to ditch Kakashi. What about Guy? He has his own team to worry about now. Naruto scowled and Sasuke rolled his eyes at the jealous ass. You're not going to tell anyone? That's a stupid question. A brief pause. Thanks, Sasuke. Go the fuck to sleep, Dobi. You're coming to team training tomorrow. But Sasuke abandoned him, walking back into his bedroom and slamming the door. The Dobi had so many issues he could probably put a Yamanaka into a damn coma. He was paranoid, antagonistic, chaotic, smug, and responded with any emotional confrontation with instant, irrational anger and then proceeded to avoid the person like the plague. He was one dysfunctional bastard, and he was the only person in the village that Sasuke genuinely liked. If the sandal was on the other foot, Sasuke realized that he would go to Naruto too. He wasn't sure how to feel about that. Naruto was a good person to have in his corner anyway. He was strong, clever, and fought dirty. He'd never seen anything come between Naruto and his goals before. He pushed Sasuke to be better and go further. He didn't know how things would change when the Dobi left, but as the sunrise began to touch his window, he decided that it was a problem for the future. He could probably still get a couple of hours if he fell asleep now. Kakashi looked down from the trees, something loosening in his chest at the sight of 3 genin waiting for him. He hadn't tracked Naruto down during the week he was missing, having known the blonde long enough to know that that would only push him further away. He still wasn't sure what he was going to say. Did he appear and act as if it had never happened? Did he take Naruto aside and apologize? That wouldn't work. Naruto didn't believe in words. Kakashi could tell Naruto that things were going to change until he was blue in the face, but none of it mattered unless he actually showed his student that he had heard and acknowledged what he'd said. He popped onto the training ground, waving a hand. Yo, are you on time? Sakura frowned at him. Are you sick or something? We have a lot of training to do, so I wanted to get a jump start on it, Kakashi replied cheerfully, desperately ignoring the venomous aura from Naruto. Sakura, I've increased your physical fitness menu, so go get started on that. Sakura just looked at him warily for a long moment, before moving slowly to follow his instructions. He was still half an hour late. Should she really be so suspicious? Sasuke, I got those weights so you can continue working on your speed. Your elemental affinity is Raiden, so he should take advantage of that. He handed over the scroll to his student, catching the looks that he was sending to Naruto. He couldn't decipher them, but Sasuke soon abandoned them both to go work on his own fitness course. Kakashi looked at his final student, but Naruto wouldn't meet his eyes, just staring angrily at the ground. This was Kakashi's fault. He'd failed his student and lost his trust. We're stepping up your bloodline limit training. Naruto still didn't look at him. I spoke to Guy about an appropriate menu for you. There was a twitch at the mention of the other Chunin. Your taijutsu is easily high Chunin level, and your ninjutsu could blow most Chunin out of the water with your reserves alone. You've managed to keep up with the speed of your bloodline limit recently, so now we need to grow both together. There was nothing he could say to fix what he broke, but he would show Naruto that he had listened. Your teammates won't be able to keep up with you, so we'll work on it separately for now, he continued. It might be good for you to spar with Sasuke occasionally, since he is also training his body for speed, but we can see how it goes. Naruto shoved his hands into his pockets, but he nodded in acknowledgement. That was more than Kakashi was expecting to get out of him at this stage. Do you have anything you want to work on? He asked directly. The kid shrugged, and Kakashi accepted that was as much as Naruto would give him right now. That was okay. Kakashi fully intended to fix things. He may never be able to regain that trust, but he could at least do right by his student starting now. Shikamaru sighed at the sight of Team 7 approaching. They were half an hour late, which Asuma-sensei hadn't been bothered about in the slightest, so Shikamaru was forced to listen to Ino whine about waiting around and the audacity of Sakura on making her wait. Choji was on his last bag of snacks and starting to look worried. Something had happened with the Yamanaka recently, and she had yelled at them during training a lot louder than usual. He'd seen her training much harder than before, and she only mentioned Sasuke a couple of times a day. It was a massive difference from the 10 times an hour they'd had before. He had no idea what inspired this change in his female teammate other than the fact it had involved Sakura in some way. He was still under the impression that they were bitter rivals over their precious Sasuke-kun, and Ino hadn't told them otherwise. It was damn troublesome. She'd nagged too much before she'd gotten the whole training thing in her head. He didn't know how this was going to go. He hadn't seen Sasuke or Sakura since graduation, and he didn't know about their third teammate. It was someone from the Genin forces who'd graduated a while ago, and Shikamaru wondered how they were faring with Sakura. Unlike Ino, she had the object of her obsession well within reach. Sasuke wasn't any easier to work with, preferring to work solo as much as he could physically get away with, so Shikamaru wasn't sure how their team dynamic was going to be. While he was glad they'd finally turned up and Ino would finally stop whining, he was sure this mission would be a drag. He wasn't sold on Ino, but her alone was way better than whatever baggage Team 7 was going to drag in with them. You're early, Kakashi, Asuma-sensei called out, causing his team's heads to snap to him in disbelief. I told you the meeting time only an hour earlier than the real time. Ma, Asuma, I have to keep you on your toes, the other Junin-sensei called back. He was pretty tall, with spiky gravity-defying silver hair and his face mostly hidden by a slanted hide and a black face mask that covered from the bridge of his nose to beneath his Chunin vest. He was slouched over and everything about him screamed, relaxed. His genin trailed behind him. Sasuke looked exactly the same as he had in the academy, scowl and all. Sakura had changed a little. She wore her long pink hair up into a high bun and wore a practical red battle dress with black leggings beneath. It had dirt smudged on it, which was something Shikamaru didn't think he'd ever see on Sakura. She'd been insane about looking her best for Sasuke-kun. The third genin was the one who caught his attention. He recognized him. It had been a few years, but it was definitely the boy from the Nara forest back then. He'd had a D rank to round up the deer for their vet checkups and struggled with the last few fawns. He hadn't changed much, still in black shinobi trousers tied with bandages at the bottom, his black sandals and sleeveless black shirt. The bandages were a shade of orange, which was new. Black fingerless gloves and black bracers to his elbow covered his thin, defined arms, and he was wearing his loose sleeveless orange hoodie this time. He was shorter than both Sakura and Sasuke and had recently shaved down the sides of his head, leaving the blonde spikes a bit longer on the top. He also had 2 swords strapped to his back that he didn't have before. Why was he with them? He'd told Shikamaru he was an apprentice, which meant he didn't have a team. Forehead, Ino yelled out, pointing accusingly at Sakura. Hi Ino pig. Sakura waved back calmly and Shikamaru blinked. That wasn't what was supposed to happen. What had that Junin-sensei done to her? Right, Asuma-sensei lit up another cigarette. We should head out to the farm. There's a lot to do and we have until sunset. Shikamaru remained lying on the grass, shifting his gaze back to the lovely clouds floating by. He didn't like D ranks, and he especially didn't like ones that involved a lot of manual labor like this one. It wasn't often that it took more than one genin team to get a D rank done, but the ones involving the farms were infamous for it. They were just too damn big. It was such a drag. Change of plans, Kakashi announced brightly. I'll take Sakura, Sasuke and your cute little genin for this mission, and you work with Naruto on his futon techniques. He needs some help applying it to his kunai, and you're the best in Konoha. I'm the only one in Konoha, you mean? Asuma blew out a puff of smoke. Hey, why does he get to skip the stupid mission? Ino snapped, crossing her arms and staring furiously at the blonde genin. Naruto, Shikamaru remembered, glared back at Ino, and his blue eyes were just as hostile and grumpy as they had been back in the forest. He couldn't imagine the guy ever smiling. Naruto has been a genin for a few years now, and D ranks are a waste of his time. He's done enough of them, Kakashi answered, seemingly unfazed by Ino's response. Hayate's working with him on his kenjutsu, but he needs more control over his futon, which is more your territory. Naruto looked just as surprised as Asuma-sensei about this turn of events. Wary blue eyes turned to Asuma-sensei. I mean, if you're happy with that, Asuma-sensei shrugged, letting out another puff of smoke. Kakashi is more than capable of overseeing the D rank on his own. Naruto didn't look convinced. This is such a drag, Shikamaru sighed. He didn't want to pick up the slack of losing a person. Naruto's gaze turned to him and there was a spark of recognition, although the blonde kept quiet. Come now children, Kakashi began waving his arms and Shikamaru reluctantly stood, shoving his hands into his pocket. We have a lot to do and we're running late. That was your fault, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura spoke up. Let's go. Kakashi ignored her, pulling out an orange book from a pouch and immediately sticking his nose into it. No time to waste. Sakura rolled her eyes and Sasuke stomped ahead, his mood by some miracle being even worse than usual. Shikamaru fell into step beside Choji as Ino bounded forward to start harassing Sakura. He looked back to see Naruto and Asuma-sensei staring at each other, although he couldn't read their expressions from here. Whatever, it wasn't any of his business and he had enough to think about with this stupid D rank. What he wouldn't give to just ditch them and go stare at the clouds somewhere, but then Ino and his mother would be on his case, and one was bad enough. Being a shinobi was so damn troublesome. Lee bounced along the road, his beloved teammates not far behind him. It was such a beautiful day for training. He was so blessed to have been placed on a team with Guy-sensei. He felt like a completely different person than he had been only a year ago, and it was all due to his sensei and power of youth. He was determined to make his teacher proud and show him that Lee could uphold the legacy of youth. He was lucky to have his teammates too. Tenten was much more confident than she had been when they were first assigned to a team together, and while Neji had not gotten any friendlier, he worked hard and met Lee with the same intensity and determination that Lee did. It truly felt like they were becoming rivals, like Guy-sensei and his rival, and Lee was over the moon. He would have to continue to work hard and show that the power of taijutsu was more than enough to compete with any opponent Lee faced. Guy-sensei said he would be running late. Lee, Tenten called out from behind him. There's no reason to rush. We must get there early so we can appropriately warm up, he called back, turning so he was walking backwards. Neji remained silent. Lee had noticed that he had been unhappier recently, but he could not think of a cause to his teammates' suffering. Neji was so strong and Lee was honored to be his rival, but there was a weight on Neji's shoulders that he refused to talk about. It was not Lee's place to ask about it, but he could at least be there for his rival if he ever wished to share the burden. Is someone already there? He turned to look into the training ground and grinned as he watched Naruto swing a sword, the metal cutting through the rock in front of him like it was butter. He had seen the pair of swords strapped to Naruto's back, but he had not seen them in use before. He had not appeared to notice their arrival, and Lee resisted the urge to call out, knowing the blonde would stop the moment he did. Naruto was someone he looked up to a lot. He was the first to inspire Lee, long before he was assigned to Gai-sensei. He told Lee that he should never give up. If he cannot use chakra, then he should work hard and find alternative ways of fighting. He had not expressed it in those exact words, but Lee understood the feeling behind them. Naruto was the hardest work that Lee had ever had the privilege to work with, even beyond himself and his teammates. Lee could only aspire to work as hard and become as strong as Naruto. The match from when they first formed their team was still fresh in his mind, and he knew he still had a long way to go before he could properly challenge Gai-sensei's first student. Naruto was not the friendliest shinobi, but Lee did not see that as a negative. Naruto preferred to show his strength through his actions rather than his words, and that only made Lee admire him more. Naruto was not a man of wasted words. He was a pillar of strength, and Lee would win him over one day with his own strength. He just had to keep working hard until the day he could meet the genin on equal footing. Naruto's dismissal of him did hurt sometimes, but Lee knew that Naruto's trust was not easily won. He was willing to work hard and prove himself worthy with the power of youth. "How can a sword cut through rock like that?" he asked Tenten, assuming that she would know. "Would it not break?" "Futon," breathed Tenten, her brown eyes sparkling. "Those with an affinity can apply to the edge of blades to make them sharper, but it's not common in Konoha. My family's shop has only made chakra-conducting blades for one junin before." Lee turned back, but he couldn't see anything special on the blade. Naruto was incredible. He could have just focused on kenjutsu, but he pushed himself a step further, just like he did every time. Naruto is truly in the springtime of his youth. Lee grinned as Naruto's head snapped towards them. "What are you doing here?" he growled, sheathing the sword as they approached. "Gai-sensei told us to meet him here for training," Tenten explained, her eyes still on the blade that was now being slung across Naruto's back. "Where did you get those?" "I stole them." Lee could not tell if he was serious or not. The blonde's face was blank and his response was completely deadpan. Tenten did not appear to know how to respond to that either. "You should not expect a civil response from him," Neji spoke up for the first time. "He cannot get past his own pettiness to attempt a normal conversation." Naruto scoffed. "Rich coming from you," he sneered. "You can't go a fucking sentence without putting someone down for your own ego." Tension bubbled between them, and Lee was not sure what the right approach was. It was evident that something had transpired between the two when Lee and Tenten had not been present, but Lee could not think of anything that could cause this level of animosity between two comrades. "Do you wish to join us in training today, Naruto-kun?" Lee tried. He did not expect the blonde to agree, but he knew he could never give up on trying to reach out to the blonde. "Gai-sensei will be along shortly and he would be thrilled to see you." "I would rather die." Such commitment. Lee grinned, deciding that he would only try and take the positives out of this, just like Gai-sensei did. "I will have to keep working hard for your acknowledgement then." Naruto stared at him for a long moment before shaking his head. "Whatever, knock off." He turned on his heel and stalked out of the training ground. Lee grinned. Naruto's temper had not sparked and he had not threatened Lee even once. That was progress. He was still not willing to engage with them, and he and Neji appeared to be on terrible terms, but he could feel like he was one step closer to his goal of taking on equal footing with Naruto and winning his trust. One day he would be able to count the blonde among his friends, and together they could blossom into their springtime of youth. Chapter 21. Naruto carefully ran the oiled cloth over the metal, avoiding the sharpened edge. He was finally starting to feel like the blades were becoming an extension of himself, just like Hayate-sensei said they should. The sword gleamed in the early morning sun, and fresh spring air curled over his seated form as he worked on his weapons. He tried to spend as little time in Sasuke's flat as possible, knowing his teammates' patience wouldn't last forever. He was still surprised that he let him stay past one night, but he wasn't willing to push it. He wasn't going to spend his saving on an inn, and with the occasional rain showers, he also didn't fancy sleeping in the forest. He was full capable, he had all of his camping equipment for missions after all, but he would be too on guard to sleep properly, and it was just a hassle he didn't need right now. He only really went to Sasuke's to sleep, but the arrangement was working. It was actually working a lot better than he thought it would. He'd always thought he would hate sharing space with someone else, but Sasuke was quiet and tidy and they only spoke to talk about training or shinobi-related stuff. He didn't try to pry or make Naruto spill his guts, and that was all he wanted. He dumped some tomatoes into Sasuke's fridge every so often and cleaned up after himself, so he supposed that was enough to keep Sasuke from kicking him out. He hadn't told Kakashi about his change of address and he hadn't registered it with the records department either. No one had come looking for him and Sasuke wouldn't say anything, so it was a non-issue. He didn't see the point in trying to find a new place when he was going to be leaving soon anyway. He'd organized his gear and his savings with storage scrolls, so his entire life currently fit into one rucksack. Whenever they finally got a C rank out of the village, he was ready. There wasn't really anything left for him in the village anyway. Guy-sensei had his team. Sasuke had his whole, kill his brother, ambitions. Kakashi would have one less student to worry about. Hayate-sensei wouldn't be that bothered since they hadn't known each other that long. He no longer had a landlady to worry about and he didn't have roots with any part of the village. The villagers would probably hold another festival when they found out he was gone. The old man would be pissed and send the Anbu after him, but the risk was worth it. He was suffocating in this place. He didn't belong here and there was a whole world out there to explore. The short time he'd spent in the capital during his own first C rank had never left him, and every opportunity he'd gotten to leave the village had only fed his desire to see what was out there. A world where nobody cared who Uzumaki Naruto was or about his past. He took the cloth off the blade and inspected it carefully. The metal was designed to be able to tolerate chakra, and since Asuma had shown him how to generate futon blades, it had quickly become his new obsession. His bloodline limit worked well with kenjutsu, and this was just a sharper, deadlier version of kenjutsu. He hadn't been sure about Asuma at first, but the man was even more laid back than Kakashi and he didn't try to abuse his authority or anything. He taught Naruto what he needed to know and left him to it. He liked that in a teacher. He hadn't shown Hayate-sensei yet, knowing that the man would tell him that he had improved his basic skills first and master the foundation before he went adding shit. He'd gone through this before with Kakashi and adding ninjutsu to his taijutsu, but he would rather practice it now so it was usable for when he struck out on his own. Kakashi had been better recently about the training, but Naruto couldn't bring himself to fully trust it. He was being allowed to train more to his actual level and he was no longer forced to go on D ranks with his teammates. Sasuke had made it a point to let Naruto know how stupid D ranks were every evening, and Naruto shared his own horror stories from when he had to do them alone with Guy-sensei. Kakashi had also stopped the teamwork exercises, which had been a huge relief to Naruto, but he couldn't help but feel it wouldn't last. Something would come up to ruin it all. Whether it was being barred from the Chunin exams yet another year or Sakura never managing to reach a level where they could work effectively as a team, he didn't know. He just knew this couldn't last. Kakashi was trying, he had to give that to the man. He'd trained with him for a long time and he knew him well. This teamwork thing was always going to explode in their faces, and Naruto was no closer to whatever Kakashi wanted from him. He was never going to be what Kakashi wanted him to be, and that made it even easier to leave. Oi, Dobi. Naruto peered over the edge to see Sasuke glaring at him. Good morning to you too. We're going to be late. What a travesty. How will Kakashi ever forgive us? You agreed to lightning tag yesterday, remember? We can't do that around Kakashi-sensei. Naruto blinked. He'd totally forgotten about that. Since Sasuke had started training his Raiden affinity, he'd gotten a lot faster. It was something that Naruto also needed to train, so they'd come up with lightning tag. It was essentially Sasuke chasing him to electrocute him with Raiden Jutsu and Naruto practicing evasion and using his futon chakra to shield the parts of his body Sasuke was targeting. It had been a rough learning curve at first, but it was great training. They weren't sure if Kakashi would allow it, especially since there were a lot of injuries at first, so they just did it before he got there. Might as well take advantage of their teacher's chronic lateness. Sakura had started turning up only half an hour before Kakashi, working on her own training somewhere else, so they had plenty of time to do their own thing. Fuck, he swore, sheathing the blade and slinging both on his back. You still owe me a new pair of pants for last time. You should have dodged. That's not what you said when I shredded your jacket. That's because I meant to tag you, not the other way around. You got way too close. Next time don't land on me. Naruto followed the other genin down the side of the building, bickering all the way down. There might be some things he would miss about Konoha. Naruto crossed his arms, tapping his foot on the wooden floor as they waited to receive their mission. They should have had a C rank by now. It had been a few months since graduation and he was itching for a mission. Every day in Konoha felt like another day for someone to figure out his plans and keep him in the village permanently. Next is Team 7, we have a painting mission, gardening, babysitting. No way. Naruto stepped forward, holding the Chunin's gaze. It was the guy that accused him of stealing the forbidden scroll, with the scar across his nose. It had been a shit night and after being rightfully cleared by the interrogation unit and flipping the Chunin the bird, he'd had to go back out and find the stupid cat. He did not have fond feelings for this Chunin and he was not about to put up with this bullshit. Give us a C rank. Naruto? Kakashi started. No, Kakashi. Naruto whirled around to glare at the Junin sensei. We've been doing dumbass D ranks for months. We're ready for a C rank. I know you are, Kakashi sighed. Sasuke could beat half the Chunin in the village and Sakura is not as useless as she was when she graduated, Naruto continued. We are all ready for this so just fucking let us. Kakashi blinked. Naruto knew what he'd said could be taken as the first and only compliment he'd ever given his female teammate but C ranks weren't that hard. Even Sakura should be capable of making it back alive. I guess we're going on a C rank then, Kakashi I smiled. Okay then, Naruto nodded, not sure what to do now. He'd expected more of a fight. Can I say something? Naruto frowned. He didn't think the Chunin got an opinion on this. I just wanted to apologize to you, Naruto, Iruka continued. I made assumptions that day that were unfair. I promised to try and be better in the future. I haven't seen you since then so I wanted to take this chance to apologize now before you head out of the village. Naruto froze, not sure what to do here. Why the fuck the guy would even apologize was escaping him and he wasn't sure what to say in return. It was unlikely that Iruka meant it. The question was why even do it at all? Here, Iruka handed Kakashi a scroll, stealing a look at a silent Naruto. You will escort Tazuna, a bridge master, back to his home in the Land of Waves. It should take about a week to get there, so prepare for 2. The rest of the information is in the scroll. Naruto grinned. This was it. This was his chance. Sasuke shot him a look but he ignored it. Let's go then. Naruto clapped his hands. Where is this guy? The door behind them slammed open and Naruto watched an old guy stumble in. The stench of alcohol was almost overwhelming. He clutched a brown bottle in one hand as he leaned the other on the doorframe. Bleary, dark eyes glared at them over the rim of thin, wire glasses and his gray beard did nothing to hide the sneer he sent their way. His olive tunic was disheveled, barely tucked into loose tan trousers. What's this? It's just a bunch of darned squirts, he slurred. You're so tiny. Are you really shinobi? Naruto clenched his fists but kept his opinion to himself. He couldn't afford to lose this mission, even if he had to put up with this pathetic geezer. I can assure you that there are wonderful shinobi, Kakashi replied cheerfully. They are more than capable of protecting you. The short one looks like he would rather stab me. Tazuna waved a bottle in Naruto's direction. That's just what his face looks like. Naruto scowled, unimpressed. We can meet in front of the front gates in half an hour, Kakashi continued. You guys know what to pack. Naruto took the chance to leave, Sasuke and Sakura not far behind him. He could do this. He just had to put up with the old man long enough to find an opportunity to slip away. A smile found its way back onto his face as he realized this could very well be the last time he would step foot in Konoha. He had to do this. This would be his best chance to finally escape the village once and for all. Sakura hefted her backpack to rest more comfortably on her shoulders. They'd been walking for days now. Konoha long faded behind them and she'd finally begun to relax. She'd been so nervous, leaving the village for the first time and on a C rank mission too. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it but she couldn't speak up and let her teammates down. She was more than aware that she was the weak link in this team and while she had been working hard to try and change that, she knew she still had a long way to go. Her physical training was paying off at least as she'd been able to keep up the whole time. They were walking a civilian pace due to Tazuna-san but she didn't feel very tired and knew she could probably keep walking all night too. It was nice to see her training finally show itself after so many grueling hours of working on her own. She's also expected a mission outside the mission to be more exciting. It had been day after day of walking and the scenery was starting to blend together. She knew she was supposed to be on alert as part of the bodyguarding mission, but it was hard to maintain that after days of nothing. The most entertaining thing had been watching Naruto hold himself back from lynching the bridge builder who'd done nothing but drink and complain the entire journey. It was actually quite nice to see his ire directed at someone else, especially since she had also grown tired of listening to their client whine. Did the scroll say we had to deliver him alive? Naruto hissed beneath his breath. That's a given on a bodyguarding mission, Dobi. Sasuke-kun muttered back, although he didn't look happy about it. I would help hide the body, she offered, smiling awkwardly as the two boys looked at her. Naruto's blue eyes watched her for a moment before he nodded slightly, his eyes turning back to the road. It was such a minor thing, but Sakura couldn't help the glow of pride. It hadn't been easy to get Naruto to acknowledge her, and he still hadn't really, but she could tell that he respected her efforts and training. Despite first impressions, Naruto wasn't a mean or malicious person. He didn't suffer fools and would not tolerate someone who tried any less than their best. It had taken some time for Sakura to see that. She was actually sort of grateful to him. He had pushed her in a way the academy and her teachers never had, and she could feel the difference in herself. She had by no means given up on winning Sasuke-kun's heart, but she'd realized that Sasuke-kun valued strength above everything else. She suspected it was why he and Naruto got on so well, although she knew that they'd known each other for much longer than they would admit. It made her feel like the odd one out. They trained together, leaving her out, and it was frustrating. She felt like she couldn't ask to join, she would just slow them down as she was now. It was a weird combination of feelings. She often found herself wishing she'd put in more effort in the academy. She was the top kunoichi, but she knew it was her paper test scores that had pushed her into that position. She was passable in the practical shinobi arts, but knowing what she did now, she'd barely scratched the surface back then. She had never pushed herself enough. It was hard, but she was trying to make up for it now. Their team dynamic had settled into something that wasn't uncomfortable, like it had been in the first few weeks. Sakura knew that her teammates didn't see her at the same level, but they didn't put her down or tell her she couldn't do it. Naruto wasn't nice about it, and Sasuke generally didn't acknowledge her existence, but she knew they accepted her efforts. It wasn't anything like she'd imagined her team when she'd been in the academy, but there was still time. So how did you two actually meet? Sakura asked. You've never actually said. I told you, Naruto replied, appearing as bored as her. I didn't drop him off a building. He answered her, without any reluctance or insults. He must be more bored than she thought. Like you could have if you'd tried. Sasuke-kun rolled his eyes. I took you up that building and I was more than capable of throwing your ass off, Naruto retorted, but it was more playful than anything? She wasn't sure she'd ever seen that from him before. You were only a baby academy student back then. You're younger than me, Dobi. What's your point? Sakura watched the exchange, things even less clear than they were before. She may never get to the bottom of this. She stepped over the puddle absent-mindedly, frowning at the ground. Would her teammates ever let her in? How hard did she have to work before she was seen as one of them? They'd only taken a few more steps before there was a splashing sound behind them. She started to turn and only managed to catch a glimpse of two figures dressed in black before a long, spiked chain wrapped around Kakashi-sensei, trapping him in place. Two foreign shinobi held the ends of the chains out of matching metal gauntlets, and Sakura's heart leapt into her throat as they pulled. Blood splattered onto the road as their teacher was torn apart with a horrifying squelch, and Sakura felt the burn of bile in the back of her throat as she stared in horror. The two shinobi barely paused as they flung themselves towards Naruto, the chain held between them to capture her teammate just like they had Kakashi-sensei. Naruto looked unfazed by their teacher's death and had already drawn his dual blades when she hadn't been looking. It was the calmest she'd ever seen him. There was no scowl or frown and sneer, just focused blue eyes that tracked the deadly chain closely. Naruto suddenly swung one of his swords into the chain and rammed it into one of the trees next to the road, the blade and chain sinking more than halfway into the thick trunk. It caught the enemy nin off guard as they were suddenly pulled to a halt, the chain pulled taut and pulling them off balance. Sakura barely had time to blink before Sasuke suddenly appeared, landing on their shoulders. She watched as he gripped their arms, kicking back into their faces. The chain detached from their gauntlets and they dove to either side. Sasuke landed gracefully into crouch where they'd been stood only a moment ago. Her gaze was torn from her crush when the enemy nin flanked and ran towards her. She pulled a kunai from her pouch, assuming a defensive stance in front of Tazuna-san. She may not be as strong as her teammates, but she could do this. She had to protect Tazuna-san. She had a few seconds to get a good look at them. One was covered by full-length, ragged black cloak while the other had a baggy, tan tunic over camouflage trousers. They both had a black gas mask over their lower faces and their Kirihite-8 had metal horns attached, keeping their long, greasy black hair out of their faces. They lunged at her, clawed gauntlets outstretched. Sakura barely had a chance to take a swipe at them with her kunai when blue filled her vision. Sasuke-kun's back blocking her view. She looked over her shoulder just in time to see Naruto swing his remaining sword, sinking it into the side of the enemy nin with the ragged cloak. Naruto tore it free with a spray of blood and kicked the nin to the side before spinning to target the second. She'd never seen him work with his blades before. He had another teacher for that and he practiced different skills when he was with them, so she hadn't realized how skilled he'd become with them. He moved the sword like it was an extension of his arm and he turned on his feet like gravity didn't affect him. She caught the flash of silver in his eyes as he swung the sword up, intent on finishing the fight then and there. A forearm reached across the enemy's neck and jerked him out of the way of Naruto's blade. Sakura felt a lump in her throat as she saw their teacher, alive and well. She didn't know how, but right now, she didn't care. Now, Naruto, we need to keep at least one of them alive for questioning, he drawled, as if he hadn't been torn apart in front of their eyes. The other one is still breathing, Naruto argued back, wiping the blood off his blade with said shinobi's cloak. He wasn't moving and Sakura didn't think he would be breathing much longer. You guys did well, Kakashi eyes smiled, dragging the limp body in his arms over to one of the trees by the side of the road. Your speed training is really paying off and you did well to stand your ground. He was looking at Sakura with that last statement and she felt the warm glow of pride wash over her. She had protected Tazuna-san. She may not have done any of the fighting, but she hadn't frozen up or held the team back. Naruto tore his second sword out of the tree, the chain falling to the ground with a loud clank. Sasuke-kun shoved his hands into his pockets beside her, but she caught the way he was looking at Kakashi-sensei. He wasn't as unaffected by their teacher's trick as he wanted to act. She'd been watching him long enough to know. Was the whole dramatic death scene necessary? Naruto asked, slinging both his sheathed swords back into a cross on his back. It was a little much. I wanted to see how my cute little genin would do on their own, Kakashi-sensei replied casually, like he hadn't added years of stress onto Sakura. He had tied up the remaining chunin and Sakura was making a point not to look at the prone body in the middle of the road. The real question is why two high-level chunin would be targeting a bridge builder, especially on a C-rank mission. All eyes turned to the sweating bridge builder. Naruto frowned as the old man finished his tale of woe. So this bastard Gato, who was some sort of big, important business guy, had pretty much taken over the land of waves and sucked all the money out of them cause he had control over the water and no one could really sneak a boat past him. So they were gonna build a bridge? The bridge would mean they could get other business that didn't involve Gato, so he wouldn't be able to continue being a bastard, but Gato knows this, so has been threatening people into giving up on the bridge using some second-rate thugs. So you want us to protect you while you build the bridge? Naruto concluded. Yes, Tazuna nodded, having sobered but considerably since the attack of the demon brothers. We've made a lot of progress but people are scared. The problem is, Tazuna-san, that you lied to us, Kakashi drawled, but Naruto could tell he was actually pissed. This is a B rank minimum, maybe an A- rank. You only requested a C rank, which is why they sent a genin team. This mission is out of our current capabilities. We could only afford a C rank, Tazuna pleaded. Please, we need your help. I say let's do it. All eyes turned to Naruto. We're already here, he continued. They need help and we can do it. There's no point in going all the way back to Konoha to send another team that they can't afford anyway. That's nice of you, said Kakashi, but he was looking at Naruto a little too intensely. He prayed that the Junin wouldn't figure him out. They couldn't go back to Konoha. He'd already made it this far and this mission was the perfect opportunity to leave Konoha in the dust. There was also a small part of him that wanted to stick it to this Gato guy. Naruto knew rich bullies and he hated them with every fiber of his being. Continuing the mission was a win-win for him. I'm with Naruto, Sasuke spoke up, crossing his arms. We can handle it. They looked at a nervous Sakura. She hesitated. I'm with my team. We should continue with the mission. Naruto honestly hadn't expected her to agree. He thought this mission was a bit much for her at her current level, but he wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. We all agree, he said, meeting Kakashi's eye. We're continuing the mission. Kakashi met his gaze for a long moment before blinking, looking over to Tazuna. You've still got us then. Tazuna grinned. Thank you. Thank you so much. What should we do with them? Naruto waved a hand over the enemy nin. One was definitely dead by now, and the one Kakashi had tied up and interrogate didn't look like he was going to wake up anytime soon. We can collect their bounties when we get back, Kakashi shrugged, throwing a scroll over to Naruto. He was your kill, so you can take the bounty. Naruto grinned. The money would come in handy. He should probably feel something more after taking a man's life, but it wasn't his first. That had been not long after he'd started C ranks with Guy-sensei. He couldn't even remember the man's face. Nice. He ignored Sakura's ill look as he stored the body into the scroll, Kakashi doing the same with the other chunin. We're not far from the boat now, Tazuna said. We can make it by nightfall and use the darkness as cover from Gato's men. Naruto shoved the scroll into his backpack and moved to follow his teammates back down the road. Things were still going to plan. Chapter 22. Naruto breathed in the crisp morning air, the freezing cold mist showering his skin with tiny droplets. He couldn't see very far in any direction from the boat with the thick, white mist, but they hadn't seen anyone else on the water in the long while they'd been stuck on the boat. Tazuna insisted on no lights, so they'd taken shifts sleeping and watching out for other vessels as they'd crept closer to the land of waves. Naruto had taken a couple of breaks to walk on the surface of the sea just to stretch his legs, but they were supposed to be on the down low, so they were forced to stay on the boat for the majority of the time. We're almost there. How can you even tell in this fog? Sakura asked the old man, squinting as she peered over the side of the boat. The bridge. Naruto only had enough time to think, what fucking bridge, before a massive white shape began to pierce through the fog. Naruto's eyes widened as the shape just kept growing bigger and bigger. For some reason, when the old man had told them about a bridge, Naruto had been imagining one like they had in Konoha, not this monster. How long had it taken them to build this thing? The smooth stone towered above their heads, and as they started passing the pillar, they were easily as thick as some of the massive trees back in the Forest of Death. This is the hope of our people, added Tazuna, looking up at the structure with a wistful gaze. They followed the bridge until Tazuna suddenly veered away from it, steering them to a destination known only to him. It wasn't long before they reached land and Naruto hopped out of the boat, wavering slightly as he adjusted to the non-moving ground. The forest began close to the shoreline and the early morning light failed to pierce the leaves, casting a dark shadow among the trees. My house isn't far, Tazuna informed them, pulling the boat out of the water with the help of Sakura and hiding it nearby, hiding it with a cloak made of fallen leaves. Naruto followed him into the trees, listening to the rustling of the leaves in the gentle sea breeze. They had been walking for about half an hour when the hair on the back of his neck stood up. He came to a dead stop, looking around. Naruto? He began, activating his bloodline limit and trying to find what was out of place. Spit it out, Dobi. He ignored Sasuke as he caught the smallest flash of white. There. He flung his kunai out and bounded after it, finding a terrified white rabbit hidden behind the bush. His kunai had sunk into the trunk of a tree barely millimeter away from one of its ears. Well done, Sasuke deadpanned, coming to look over his shoulder. You have defeated the evil bunny. There was something off about this. Why was there a white rabbit here? It didn't blend into its surroundings at all. Not a great survival mechanism. Duck. Naruto hit the deck, dragging Sasuke down with him just in time for a massive gray sword to fly through the air where their heads had been and sink into one of the tree trunks further up. It was at least as tall as Kakashi, with a rectangular shape and a large hole cut out of it near the tip. He lifted his head to see a foreign nin land on the handle of the blade, staring down at them. He was a big guy, at least as tall as Kakashi. Black spiky hair was held out of his face by a hite-8, the metal plate with the Kiri symbol on the side of his head. He was shirtless, showing off a muscular physique with a thick black belt running diagonally across his chest. Matching arm and leg warmers with a brown cow pattern covered his limbs and gray striped trousers were tucked into the leg warmers. White bandages covered the lower half of his face and dark brown eyes glared at them. If it isn't Momochi Zabuza. Kakashi walked up from behind them as Naruto pulled himself up from the forest floor. You three protect the bridge builder. He reached up to push his Hite-8 out of his face, revealing a single red eye that locked onto the enemy nin. Naruto stood in position in front of the bridge builder, with Sakura and Sasuke either side of him, when Zabuza pulled the massive sword from the trunk, landing silently on the grass. Kirigakure no Jutsu. Thick, white fog began to roll in and Naruto could barely see the man anymore. The fog continued to thicken until he lost sight of everything except his teammates and the bridge builder. He began the hand seals for a futon technique but Kakashi beat him to it, the strong winds blowing away the thick fog in mere seconds. His heart leapt into his throat as he looked behind him to see Zabuza swinging for the bridge builder. He felt something shove him out of the way and as he rolled to a stop, he snapped his eyes towards the two Junin. Kakashi had managed to sink a kunai into Zabuza's chest but the Kiri nin vanished, water splashing to the ground around them. A water clone? Another Zabuza swung his sword and cut straight through Kakashi's torso but his teacher also vanished, his form fading into water in exactly the same way as the Kiri nin. Naruto tore his gaze from the fight to find Tazuna, quickly locating him near Sakura. Sasuke had landed a bit away from them and Naruto hauled himself up, quickly running to plant himself between the two battling Junin and the bridge builder. He looked back just in time to see Kakashi get kicked in the face, landing in the nearby lake. Suiro no Jutsu. Naruto watched with wide eyes as Kakashi was imprisoned by a ball of water. Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. A clone rose from the lake, soon solidifying into another Zabuza. Naruto barely ducked to avoid a kick to the face, his bloodline limit saving his skin. He rolled out of the way of the next blow, trying to watch for the faint muscle twitches that would tell him Zabuza's next move. You're good at running away, brat. Or your aim's shit, Naruto snapped back, unable to help himself. He tore his swords from his back, gritting his teeth as he barely stopped the massive blade from taking his head off. He wasn't able to stop the foot and he choked back bile as he was thrown back. He got up in time to see Sasuke fling shuriken at the enemy nin, the man easily batting them away. It had only been a distraction as Sasuke jumped high into the air, aiming another kunai at the man's eyes. He swore as Sasuke was caught around his throat and the man threw him one-handed across the clearing. Sasuke hit the ground hard and Zabuza followed the move with a stomp to Sasuke's stomach. Naruto growled, channeling futon chakra into the blades and swinging. It didn't make a dent but it was enough to get his foot off Sasuke who managed to roll away. You just insist on getting in my way, Zabuza growled, losing interest in Sasuke to focus on Naruto. He tried to think through the adrenaline rushing through his veins. How were they going to beat this guy? He'd captured Kakashi and Naruto knew his kenjutsu was no match for him at his current level. He hopped backwards as Zabuza took another swing. I'll distract this guy, he yelled at Sasuke. He didn't have time to figure out a better plan. Figure out how to get the real one. Bold words from a mere genin, Zabuza scoffed. You think you can beat me with your toy swords? Naruto didn't have the breath to reply as he dodged another swing. His bloodline limit slowed things down around, allowing him to see every twitch, every bead of sweat, every beat of his carotid, the flicker of his eyes. It was just enough to keep him half a step ahead and out of the path of the giant blade. Is all you're good for is running away, brat? Naruto's reply was muffled by the sound of a large explosion and they both looked back to see the real Zabuza flinch from an explosion next to his ear. It was just enough to distract him and the water prison around Kakashi melted away. A flicker out the corner of his eye was the only warning Naruto got as he brought up both swords to block the next blow. The weight of it pushed him back several steps and he could feel his arms shaking. He wasn't sure how many more of these he could take. He blinked as the clone suddenly splashed to the floor, a soaking wet Kakashi appearing from behind. You've done well, he praised, turning back to face Zabuza and stepping back onto the water. Go to your teammates. Naruto nodded, scrambling towards a panting Sasuke. He could see Sakura crouching over a petrified Tazuna not far from them. Explosion seal on a kunai? Yes. Nice. He turned back to see Kakashi and Zabuza flipping through identical hand seals at the same rate. They called out at the same time. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Naruto watched twin dragons rise from the surface of the water, the blue scales shining in the afternoon sun. They clashed in a massive explosion of water and Naruto watched in awe as they rammed into each other, the sound echoing across the clearing. He looked back down to see Kakashi and Zabuza locked in combat beneath the giant dragons, Kakashi holding back the massive blade with the metal plates on the back of his gloves. The dragons vanished from above with a splash and Zabuza and Kakashi circled each other. Every movement Zabuza did, Kakashi followed identically at exactly the same time. It was something the Junin had said Naruto would be able to do with enough mastery of his bloodline limit, but he knew he wasn't close to this level yet. For the first time since he'd made his plans to leave, he felt a small pang of regret. When he left, he wouldn't have Kakashi to help him anymore. It wasn't going to be enough to stop him, but it was unexpected. Going to do next? Kakashi suddenly spoke up and Naruto grinned at the freaked out look in Zabuza's eyes. All you're doing is copying me like a monkey, Zabuza spat, his hands clasped into front of him in a hand seal. You can't beat me with cheap tricks. I'll crush you. Kakashi's voice overlapped with Zabuza's and as Zabuza's hands began to move, Kakashi's moved with them. Kakashi was the one to speak first. Sweden. Daibakufu no Jutsu. A torrential swirl of water began to circle Kakashi, increasing in strength and size before it slammed into Zabuza with a giant crash, Zabuza calling out in pain. Naruto lost sight of him in the violent swell and Naruto watched the massive wave tear through the forest in its path, presumably carrying Zabuza along with it. The water level took a few seconds to die down and when it finally did, Zabuza was pinned to a tree by kunai piercing his limbs. Kakashi crouched on one of the tree branches above. Can you see into the future? Coughed Zabuza. Yes. Kakashi took out another kunai from his pouch. This is your last battle. He was interrupted by twin senbons appearing out of nowhere, striking Zabuza and sending a spray of blood into the air. Zabuza slumped to the ground and all eyes went to the figure standing among the leaves. Two long strands of dark hair, tied at the bottom with scraps of white fabric, framed a bone-white mask that hid the person's identity. Red swirls covered where the mouth would have been and the symbol of Kiri was carved into the forehead. The rest of their hair was tied back into a bun and a loose, dark gray kimono covered their body, an olive, striped turtleneck covering up every inch of skin. They were pretty small and Naruto didn't think they could be much older than him. They appeared next to Zabuza in a swirl of wind, dragging the large man to rest across their shoulders. Your battle is over for now, they spoke softly, their voice further giving away their youth. I must get rid of this corpse to protect the secrets it keeps. Please excuse me. They raised a hand and vanished in another gust of wind. Kakashi reached up and covered the Sharingan, but Naruto caught Sasuke's intense look toward their teacher. That was a mess waiting to happen. We still need to take Tazuna-san home. Kakashi broke the silence. You can all rest at my house. The bridge builder offered cheerfully, appearing happy to still be breathing. Kakashi nodded and turned to walk. He only made it a few steps before he face planted, his limbs going limp. Naruto deactivated his bloodline limit as he ran up to the Junin, checking his pulse. Feeling it strong and steady beneath his fingers, he let out a quiet sigh of relief. He may be annoyed at the man, but he didn't want him to die. Kakashi-sensei, cried Sakura, the group running up to join them. He's fine. Naruto started dragging their teacher onto his shoulders. He struggled for a moment, his arms not recovered from taking the brunt of Zabuza's blade. He's just used too much chakra. Lead the way, Tazuna. The bridge builder hesitated for a moment before starting to walk forward. Sasuke walked up to his side. Did you know he had a Sharingan? Sasuke demanded. He's the copy nin, Naruto huffed back, adjusting his grip on Kakashi. His name is literally Sharingan no Kakashi in the bingo book. I thought you knew. Sasuke didn't reply and Naruto focused on not dropping their teacher. Tazuna's house shouldn't be too much further. Naruto watched as Tazuna's daughter Tsunami checked over Kakashi. Will you be okay? She asked, hands on her hips as she looked down at him. Not really. Kakashi slowly sat up from where he'd been lying on the green futon. It will be hard to move for about a week. Well, it would be better if you didn't move for a while. Oh okay. Kakashi sank back into the pillow, pulling the blanket to beneath his chin. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura called out, bouncing into the room. You're awake. Naruto stayed back as he watched the pinkette fuss over their teacher. Kakashi was down for at least a week, so if he made his move in the next couple of days, the Junin would be still too drained to chase after him. He could send the Nindogs back to summon the Anbu, but that would take at least a further 2 days, giving him a 4-day head start. He could work with that. That kid with the mask? Who was he? Anbu Black Ops from Kirigakure. He was wearing the mask of the Elite Tracking Unit. Elite Tracking Unit? They're commonly called the Fire Extinguishing Corps. Their duty is to erase all traces that a shinobi had ever lived. The body of a shinobi can reveal a variety of things. Ninjutsu secrets and chakra characteristics of their village. Even the compositions of secret medicines that may have been used on them. In essence, they prevent village secrets from leaking out by killing missing nin who've run away from their village and completely eliminating their bodies. Konoha's version would be the ones hunting Naruto down when he made his escape. They didn't destroy the body though, he felt the need to point out. Hunter nin are supposed to destroy them on the spot. He'd done a lot of research into that branch of Anbu. They were damn hard to find anything about them considering they were Anbu, and also he wasn't able to find out much, but he knew at least that. Not that he thought they would kill him if they caught him, but he wouldn't put it past people to finally get rid of the demon brat. Zabuza is alive. Kakashi nodded, having sat back up at the realization. What? Tazuna screeched. The fake hunter nin must have put him into a state of near death, Kakashi continued. The senbon the hunter nin used wouldn't have been enough to kill him unless it hit a vital spot. So what now? Naruto asked, eyebrow raised. You can't move. We can still prepare, Kakashi replied. We can step up your training for the week so you can be more prepared for the next time we face them. We can't get that strong that quickly. Sakura argued. You all did well in this battle, Kakashi countered. You've all grown a lot since you became a team. Naruto also didn't think that only a week of training would get them to a level where they could fight Zabuza, but it wasn't like he planned to be around for that long. Grandpa. They turned to see a little kid appear in the doorway. He wore forest green overalls over a pale yellow t-shirt, a blue striped bucket hat covering short, black hair. He ignored them all as he ran straight for the old man. Inari. Tazuna hugged the kid close. Inari, what sort of greeting is that? Tsunami told him off. These are the shinobi who escorted your grandpa home safely. It's okay, Tazuna waved her off. Right, Inari? The kid glared at them from beneath the brim of the bucket hat. He turned to his mother. Mom, these guys will die, he said as if he was saying the sky is blue and the grass was green. There's no way they can beat Gato and win. Oi, Naruto growled. If you don't want to die, hurry up and go home, the kid added, starting to walk out of the room. Where are you going, Inari? Tazuna called out. The sea, Inari answered quietly. I'll be looking at the sea. He left the room and Tsunami immediately turned to them. I'm sorry about my son, she said, her voice thick with grief. He's been through a lot. Naruto glanced at her but left it alone. He had better things to do than concern himself with some bitter brat. He had a golden window of opportunity and he wasn't going to miss it. Sasuke sat on the porch of the house, basking in the silence of the night. The lights were out and he could see the blanket of stars in the night sky, shining like gems. The leaves rustled gently and the cold air was refreshing, keeping him alert as he waited for his target. He hadn't had a chance to confront Kakashi about the Sharingan yet. The man had fallen back asleep pretty quickly after Inari had ditched them, and apparently his chakra exhaustion would be keeping him down for a whole week. How hadn't he noticed before? He wanted to be mad at Naruto for not telling him, but the blonde also had a point. He was in the damn bingo book as Sharingan no Kakashi. He definitely wasn't a member of the Uchiha clan, so Sasuke didn't know why he was in possession of their bloodline limit, but he had a few guesses. He didn't think his clan would have allowed him to keep it if it had been forcibly taken, but for the life of him he couldn't think of a single Uchiha would have given away the Sharingan. He had been told so many times growing that the Sharingan was the pride of the clan and had to be protected at all costs. Only an idiot would have given it to someone like that. Was that why Sasuke was assigned to him? He hadn't managed to awaken his own Sharingan, but when he did, it wasn't as if he had clan members to help him. Kakashi might be closest. He got to a real instructor for the Sharingan and it left a sour taste in his mouth. He heard the faint creak of wood and turned, meeting Naruto's blue eyes. You didn't have to wait up. You're really leaving now? Naruto remained silent for a long moment, one hand on the strap of his backpack. Zabuza is going to be back and Kakashi-sensei is currently useless. I know, Naruto rolled his eyes, hopping down the front steps. That's why we're going to kill Gato before I go. That caught Sasuke off guard. What? No Gato, no mission for Zabuza, no reason to go after Tazuna, Naruto explained. You guys will be safe again and can babysit the old man while he finishes the bridge. Sasuke was honestly surprised. He had been half expecting the Uzumaki to just disappear and leave them to their fates. I want to leave but not at the expense of your lives, Naruto added quietly. Sasuke wasn't sure how to respond to that. I'm pretty sure Kakashi-sensei will notice you're missing. He changed to the subject, looking away from his teammate. Naruto laughed, the quiet sincerity vanishing as quickly as it arrived. I've been working on my Kage Bunshin with Kakashi for weeks, he revealed. It wasn't news to Sasuke. You were doing that to get out of D ranks. I can multitask. Naruto waved at him and Sasuke heaved himself up, following him away from the house. I needed to get them to a point where they could fool him for a while. With his chakra exhaustion, it'll be much harder for him to tell, and if I make just one clone, it'll last a few days. Once we've killed Gato, I'll send a clone back with you to continue things like normal. And if they wake up looking for us, I drugged them all at dinner, Naruto shrugged. Except Kakashi, he would totally be able to tell, but thankfully the chakra exhaustion will be enough to keep him down. This was news to Sasuke. He could never predict this guy. And what if Gato has hired more like Zabuza? He asked, continuing to try and find holes in the plan. Zabuza is also out of commission like Kakashi, and a strong guy like that wouldn't share a bounty. Gato probably has a bunch of low-level thugs that are cheap to hire. Tsunami was telling me about them. That's a pretty big fucking guess, Dobi. Look, are you going to help me liberate the land of waves or not? Naruto frowned at him. If you're just going to ask stupid question the whole time, I'd be better on my own. Sasuke shook his head. Fine, he relented. You really thought this out? Of course I did, Naruto replied, leading the way through the trees. This is my one chance, Sasuke. Kakashi won't be able to come after me and it'll take at least 2 days before Konoha would even find out. There was a long moment of silence as they trekked through the trees. Why did you trust with me with this? Sasuke couldn't help but ask, the question having rolled around his head since Naruto had first brought up the idea of leaving. I could turn around and ruin everything in a second. As a Konoha shinobi, that is what I should be doing. I'm the margin of error in this plan. Naruto didn't reply for a few minutes. Why didn't you tell anyone before we came out on this mission? He countered. You had plenty of opportunities. Like you said, it's what a good Konoha shinobi would do. Sasuke shot him a look, keeping his mouth shut. He would never say the real reason out loud, just as Naruto wouldn't. It wasn't how they worked. Sasuke could say that Naruto was his first and only friend, that he was the only person in the village to treat him like Sasuke, rather than the last Uchiha, that he was the only reason Sasuke didn't go insane back at the academy, but what would that accomplish? Naruto was still going to leave him behind. He was going to leave him on Team 7 without a training partner and without the one damn person in the village he could be himself with. He kept trying to tell himself that with Naruto gone he could focus more on his goal to kill Itachi, but it rang hollow. Naruto didn't take it easy on him and pushed Sasuke to be better. He didn't need the damn Dobi's help to take down Itachi, but he was a good training partner. Despite all this, he couldn't begrudge Naruto for leaving. He'd seen firsthand what the blonde went through, and if the shoe was on the other foot, Sasuke would have left ages ago. It didn't mean he was happy about it. Turns out I'm not a good Konoha shinobi, he said, avoiding the real question. Naruto chuckled. Me either. It didn't take them long to reach a break in the trees and Sasuke joined Naruto in kneeling behind a large rock, watching the dark, quiet mansion. He could see a couple guards wandering around the place but nothing they couldn't handle. So what's the plan? Naruto pulled out a roll of seals from his backpack, a delightful glee plastered across his face. Sasuke knew that look. Really, Dobi? Someone is going to notice the damn explosions in the middle of the night. It'll pull every guard Gato has back to the house. Actually, Naruto pouted, as if Sasuke was the one not thinking things through. These are for their boats as a just-in-case measure. I need to steal one of the boats anyway, so I'll plant them when I go. I was planning on arson for the house, much quieter. Sasuke hit his forehead with his palm. Naruto wouldn't know subtle if it kicked him in the face. People are still going to notice, Dobi. It doesn't matter if they notice, Naruto shrugged off his comment. We'll be gone and Gato will be dead before anyone tries to investigate. The villagers live too far away. With my futon and your Kaden, the house will go up too fast for them to do anything about it. If they escape the fire, we can pick them off outside while they're disorientated. Just look at the house. Gato is way too arrogant and has super lax security right now. He'll never see it coming. Sasuke sat back on his haunches. That, actually wasn't a bad plan. He was thrown off balance, almost falling on his ass as Naruto shoved him. You don't have to look so surprised. Sasuke flipped him the bird and Naruto stuck his tongue out in reply. Alright, Dobi, let's get this over with before we're stuck here all night. Naruto grinned at him, the familiar gleam of chaos in his eyes. Sasuke couldn't help the anticipation he felt for what they were about to do. Life in Konoha was going to be boring without him. Chapter 23. Kakashi rose to awareness slowly, blinking the black spots out of his eye. Chakra exhaustion was the absolute worst. His limbs felt like lead, his throat was dry and his brain was full of cotton wool. He'd think he'd learnt the consequences of overusing the Sharingan in the nearly 14 years he'd been in possession of Obito's eye, but he couldn't take Momochi Zabuza lightly, not with his team in danger. They'd responded to serious combat better than he'd thought they would. Sakura hadn't left Tazuna's shadow the whole fight and Sasuke and Naruto held their own, if only barely. They hadn't been ready for a real fight against the missing nin, but they survived and that was enough in Kakashi's book. Naruto especially had been a lot more skilled with his kenjutsu than he'd anticipated, and his training with his bloodline limit really shone through. He could see the threat the blonde was going to be in only a few years. A blurry pink head appeared above him and he blinked at the shape, his vision slowly clearing to reveal the worried face of his sole female genin. Kakashi-sensei, are you okay? She asked, green eyes scanning his form as if looking for new injuries. Ma, Sakura, have a little faith in your sensei. He waved her off, hauling himself upright. He made a conscious effort not to let her see how much of a struggle it was. Where are the others? I haven't seen them yet, she shrugged, seeming to accept that he wasn't about to drop dead. Everyone woke up late today, so I was helping Tsunami-san. Kakashi wasn't surprised that the genin had slept in. The fight yesterday would have taken a lot out of them. Sasuke walked in the door, toweling off his hair before it could drip onto the wooden floor. Sasuke-kun. Sakura blushed. I didn't see you this morning. Not my fault that you all lazed about all morning, Sasuke replied. I got some training in with the dobi, then went to clean up. Kakashi spied a white bandage peeking out from beneath Sasuke's sleeve that hadn't been there yesterday. There was also a bruise forming on his shin that his shorts couldn't hide. Did you hurt yourself? Training, Sasuke said shortly. The dobi doesn't hold back. Where is Naruto now? Sasuke was interrupted by Tazuna bursting into the room. Fire. He waved his woven hat in the air like a victory flag. Gato's dead. Kakashi leant forward abruptly, ignoring the pain at the movement. What? Gato's dead, Tazuna gleefully informed him. His mansion caught fire and someone just confirmed the body. He's dead, so are most of his men. That didn't make sense. It couldn't be a coincidence that they arrived in wave and Gato was killed only a few hours later. Zabuza had to still be recovering, so he may have had less protection last night, but it didn't make sense for one of the villagers to suddenly find the courage to stand up to Gato. Where's Naruto? He asked Sasuke again, urgency leaking into his tone. The dobi was outside last time I saw him. As if summoned by the sound of his name, Naruto stepped into the room, raising an eyebrow as all eyes turned to him. He took a moment to stare at the ecstatic Tazuna. Has the geezer been drinking already? Gato is dead. Tazuna laughed. Naruto blinked. Is that what everyone has been cheering about? He crossed his arms. Who got him? Who cares? Tazuna threw up his hands. All that matters is that the rotten bastard is dead and the land of waves is free. Naruto looked over at Kakashi, as if seeking confirmation. Kakashi could only shrug in reply. He would have to find some crutches so he could verify for himself. He took the chance to look carefully over his genin. He couldn't see any wounds or dark smudges. No ash or frayed clothing that could suggest his student had been near a fire recently. He couldn't smell anything either. He couldn't think of a single reason for Naruto to take down Gato by himself, and there wasn't any obvious evidence to point towards him being responsible. There was nothing off about him, so Kakashi didn't know why he was getting this nagging feeling at the back of his mind. What about Zabuza and that hunter Nin? Sakura asked worriedly. Their employer is dead and they can't get paid, Kakashi assured her. They have no reason to keep going after Tazuna or the bridge. Does that mean we have to go back to Konoha? Kakashi looked back at Naruto. The blonde didn't seem as thrilled at the news of Gato's demise as Tazuna. He knew from Guy that Naruto loved being out of the village, so he probably wasn't pleased that they might have to go straight home, especially after being told they would be away for at least 2 weeks. We were hired to protect the bridge while it was being built, so we need to stick around until it's finished. Kakashi's eyes smiled, catching the relief in Naruto's eyes before it was quickly hidden. We can continue with the training plan, even if Zabuza is no longer a problem. He pushed the blanket off of him. Tazuna-san, can you please find me a pair of crutches? He asked politely. I would like to look at Gato's mansion myself. It didn't sit well with him not knowing who did this. There could be a third party they weren't aware of. Are you sure you should be moving, Kakashi-sensei? He patted the top of Sakura's hair gently. I will be fine, Sakura. Now, go help Tazuna-san find those crutches. It was a bit disconcerting to see a man of Tazuna's age almost skip out of the room, but Kakashi couldn't exactly hold against the man. No one had been expecting for Gato to die like this. You too, Kakashi gestured to a quiet Naruto and Sasuke. Did you hear anything last night? The pair shared a look. Nope, Naruto shook his head. Someone would have seen it though. If it was big a fire as Tazuna's making it seem, people would have had to have seen something. He had a point there. What he didn't know was why it taken so long for the news to reach them. Why hadn't some sort of alarm been sounded during the night when the fire would have been more visible? We only woke up a couple of hours before Sakura, Sasuke added. It was already light and Tazuna and his family woke up after us. Okay, Kakashi nodded. Go and see if anyone needs help in town. Things are sure to change quickly once people calm down. Sasuke nodded while Naruto threw him a mock salute and the two boys left the room. It was the most Naruto had spoken to him since their argument. He didn't know what had invited this change, but with how this mission was turning out, Kakashi was going to take what he could get. His first priority had to be finding out who had taken out Gato. He needed to make sure there was nothing else that could threaten his team. Naruto grinned as he breathed in the fresh, salty air. He'd been sailing since parting ways with Sasuke and planting the explosion seals on the other boats. It was a much bigger boat than the one Tazuna had snuck into wave with, but it was manageable. Naruto didn't know how all the ropes and sails and shit worked, but he'd managed to shove the sails into a position where it could catch some wind and pull him forward. He was prepared to use futon to get him the rest of way there if the wind dropped, but it seemed to hold steady for now. There was only open water around him for miles, so he was completely reliant on the compass to guide the way. From the maps he'd studied prior to leaving Konoha, he just had to keep going directly west to reach the collection of islands that made up the land of water. The ocean was weird after being surrounded by trees his whole life, but it just fueled the desire in him to leave the land of fire far behind him. He didn't know what would be waiting for him in the land of water, but he would manage. He could do this. He'd had to ditch his orange hoodie and orange bandages, shoving them in a storage scroll at the bottom of his bag. He would have to stay away from orange for a while, as much as it pained him. He was the only person he knew that liked the color, so it would be dead giveaway when they came looking for him. He now wore loose brown trousers, a black long-sleeved top and a threadbare brown vest. He'd left his Hite-8 back in Konoha. He never wore it, so no one had noticed anyway. His swords were also safely sealed away. He would have to track down a less recognizable one so he could continue with his training. He'd clumsily shaved his head soon after setting sail, figuring it was easier than dyeing it, and he'd covered the whisker marks on his cheek with thick sunscreen. It wasn't great and he would have to find a better solution, but it would do for now. He'd firmly tied a brown bucket hat he's found lying around Tazuna's house onto his head, and he could confidently say he looked nothing like Uzumaki Naruto. He couldn't change his eye color, but that wouldn't be able to give him away, not with all the other changes he'd made. He could see the style in the land of water and adapt some things, but he was pretty happy with the result. This was going to work. He had thought about this from every angle. He'd been gathering supplies since the landlady had kicked him out. Sasuke would keep his mouth shut and his clone hadn't been discovered yet, and with the level of chakra exhaustion Kakashi had suffered, it might take days until he could sense something was off, or his clone would do something stupid and get itself dismissed. It didn't really matter which one it was, as long it happened when Naruto was at least another couple of days away. He didn't know how long it took to sail to the land of water, but it couldn't be more than a week and he had enough food stored for a month. He took another deep breath, gazing at the passing waves. There was a whole world waiting for him outside the suffocating clutches of Konoha. He did feel a small pit of something in his gut, whether it was guilt or sadness at leaving behind the people he didn't actually want to run away from, but they weren't enough to overpower his hatred of Konoha. They weren't enough to erase all the voices that had insulted him, all the cold eyes that followed him the street, all the times he'd been kicked out of places. There was nothing Konoha could do to fix the damage that had been done. There was nothing the Hokage could offer that would miraculously turn Naruto in a loyal Konoha shinobi. The will of fire that the old man had always talked about had been snuffed out a long time ago, leaving only a burning rage in its wake. He was done with putting up with people's shit. It was time to finally live the life that he chose. One far away from Konoha, Sasuke lugged the massive stone over to the edge of the almost completed bridge. It was dull work but good strength training, and the sooner they finished this damn bridge, the sooner they could go home and work on real training. They had made a lot of progress on the bridge in the past couple of days, even with Kakashi sitting on the side with his crutches. Now Gato was gone. The villagers had offered to help with the bridge. Sakura had actually been pulling her weight and kept up a decent pace. Naruto's clone had also kept up, but Sasuke was just waiting for the technique to run out of chakra. He'd never seen it maintained for this long, and Naruto had said before he left that he didn't actually know how long the thing would last. It was a matter of whether the clone would pop first or if Kakashi noticed. Kakashi was usually a lot better at recognizing the clones back in Konoha when Naruto used to them to try and get out of the chores. Sasuke didn't know if it was the chakra exhaustion or the fact he wasn't expecting Naruto to use a clone on the mission, or a combination of the two, but he hadn't said anything yet. Naruto had sailed away 3 nights ago and he hadn't told Sasuke where he was heading, citing plausible deniability. So he had no idea where the blonde could be by now. He dumped the stone into place, shaking out his arm as he turned to grab another. "You little shinobi sure are strong." Tazuna grinned from where he was doing something to keep the stones together. "My men can hardly keep up." His men were civilians that, while admittedly strong from months of lugging around stones for the bridge, were still civilians. Sasuke could take on any of them of a bad day. He was managing even with the burns scattered beneath his clothing. They were nothing serious, but they were damn annoying. They could be covered by his clothing, so Kakashi hadn't seen them and connected the dots. They hadn't been able to escape Gato's place totally unscathed, but it was still a good result overall. Kakashi didn't suspect them even after he went over the mansion himself, and Zabuza hadn't turned up to kill them for taking out his money source. "My cute little genin are the best," Kakashi agreed, and Sasuke ground his teeth together. He hated that dumb term Kakashi used for them. The Naruto clone threw Kakashi a glower. At least the clone was still in character. The stone slipped through the clone's fingers and he yelped, jumping away from the stone block and just barely avoiding the hit that would blow it out of existence. It was honestly a miracle the clone had lasted this long. "At this rate, we'll be finished in a few days," Tazuna continued, the cheer rising around him at the announcement. "We'll be back on the map and can start trading. It feels like we've been away from Konoha for ages," Sakura commented, a few wisps of pink head sticking to her forehead. "Are all C ranks like this?" She directed the last question at Kakashi. "Not really," he admitted, eyes smiling. "This would be more equivalent to a B rank. An A- rank if someone hadn't killed Gato, since Zabuza would have kept coming after us. C ranks are only a small step up from D ranks," the Naruto clone added. "It's basically chores but outside the village." Sasuke hauled up the next stone, ignoring his team. The Naruto clone had picked up their own stone and dropped it in the right spot, dusting his hands off onto his trousers. "Look out." The clone couldn't react in time and Sasuke watched it disappear into a cloud of white smoke with a pop as a bucket swung through where its head had been. They were usually more durable than that when Naruto made only one, but it had been a few days. Kakashi lurched forward out of the corner of his eyes, seeming to forget about the crutches. Sasuke dumped the stone he was carrying at his feet, preparing for the aftermath. Why is he using a clone? Sakura asked innocently. The bridge work isn't that bad. Sasuke watched the emotions flicker across Kakashi's too fast to keep track and braced himself as the Junin snapped his head to him, dark gray eye furious. Sasuke vowed that the next time he saw the Dobi, he would deck him for leaving this mess in Sasuke's lap. Naruto popped out of existence and Kakashi's world stopped for a second. A clone. A cage bunshin. How had he not noticed? How the fuck had he not noticed? How long had he been gone? His chakra exhaustion was bad, but he didn't think it was unable to detect Kage Bunshin bad. Naruto had spent weeks using his clones to get out of D ranks and Kakashi had been able to find them every time. How hadn't he noticed? Logically, he knew there were a few factors. His chakra exhaustion, the fact he hadn't been expecting it, the whole Gato mystery, but he was still a Junin of Konoha. He should have fucking noticed when one of his genin replaced himself with a damn clone. He turned to look at an unsurprised Sasuke and felt the fury bubble in his chest. He would bet the pay for an S-rank mission that Sasuke knew about this, and he didn't tell Kakashi. He didn't try to stop him. He kept his mouth shut and let his teammate defect from the village. There was a faint hope that Naruto merely wanted to escape the mundane manual labor, but Kakashi could feel the truth in his bones. Naruto had finally defected from Konoha. He held up his hand and summoned Pakun and the rest of the pack, feeling the drain heavily on his meager reserves. Find Naruto. Now. They understood the level of urgency and took off. Kakashi knew it was a bit futile. They couldn't follow the scent across the water and they were on a damn island. There was little to no chance that Naruto hadn't sailed away, but he had to cover his bases. Sasuke, he snapped, limping down the bridge. The Uchiha reluctantly followed him until they were a safe hearing distance from the civilians. What do you know? Sasuke crossed his arms. Why would I know anything about what that Dobi does? Enough, Sasuke, Kakashi ordered. This isn't the time. Your teammate has defected. Do you realize how serious this is? Sasuke shuffled uncomfortably but maintained the eye contact. He's probably just trying to get out of the bridge work. He will be labeled a missing nin. They will send Anbu after him and they may kill him if he refuses to come back. That doesn't even take into account the foreign nin that will be after him if word gets out. Why would anyone care? Sasuke argued. He's just a genin. Kakashi's teeth clicked as he shut his mouth. He couldn't tell him about the Kyuubi. No one outside of Konoha should know, but it was horribly kept secret within the village walls and Kakashi wasn't naive enough to believe that it hadn't made it out of the confines of the village. He is still a shinobi on Konoha, and genin or not, he is a missing nin, Kakashi stressed. Tell me what you know. I don't know anything. Sasuke snapped, irritated. He didn't tell me where he was going. So you knew he was leaving? Sasuke remained silent and Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose. Sasuke, you aided and abetted, that is also a crime. This only seemed to make things worse. I told you, he didn't tell me shit, Sasuke scowled. I knew about the clone, but I thought he was just trying to get out of work. I didn't know he was going to run. The kid was lying through his teeth, but there was nothing Kakashi could do without the help of a Yamanaka. He had to tell the Hokage about Naruto, but he would keep quiet about Sasuke for now. The Uchiha knew something, but Kakashi didn't want to put him through the stress of an interrogation, and there was a small part of him that was proud of him. It was wrong considering the situation, but factoring in how anti-teamwork both Naruto and Sasuke were, them supporting each other like this was good in a very bad way. It was biting him in the ass right now. He was going to be in so much trouble for losing him. Shit, he swore, running a hand aggressively through his hair. We need to retrace his steps. We need to find him. We don't know how long he was replaced with a clone, Sasuke pointed out unhelpfully. We know he was the real one after the fight with Zabuza, Kakashi replied. The earliest it could have been was that night. Dots connected. The night Gato died in the fire. Kakashi zeroed in on the bandage that still covered Sasuke's upper arm. He reached forward, and although Sasuke tried to resist, he was no match for a pissed-off Kakashi. He ripped the bandage off to see a small burn. It was starting to heal, maybe 3 days old. What did you two do? I burned myself on the stove in the kitchen. Sasuke spat back and Kakashi was tempted to throw the frustrating little shit into the sea. He still didn't get how serious this was. Even with that revelation, he couldn't think of a single reason for the two genin to go rogue and murder Gato. Their mission had been to protect Tazuna and the bridge, so it could very technically still fall into the mission parameters, but it felt like it came from nowhere. A distraction for Naruto? He could think of at least 3 better ways of doing that. Every fiber of his being wanted to chase after Naruto right this second. He couldn't leave Sakura and Sasuke alone in a foreign country, and he was still recovering his chakra. Naruto would have known that. Naruto also knew that the chakra exhaustion would have made it harder for Kakashi to detect the Kage Bunshin. This was too well planned. How long had he been waiting for the opportunity? Was this why he was so adamant about getting a C-rank mission? The pieces kept falling into place, and with every dot connected, Kakashi felt more and more like an idiot. How had he not seen this? In hindsight, it was so obvious. Oh gods, what would Minato-sensei and Kushina-ne think? Their son was so unhappy in the village they died to protect that he ran off, and Kakashi was too incompetent to stop him. He was pulled from his spiraling thoughts by the taps of paws against stone. He's not on the island, Pakun reported, panting. We lost his scent by the boats. He's probably taken one, Kakashi sighed. Gato wasn't using them anymore. Was that why he killed the tyrant? He turned back to Sasuke. We are not done, he warned him. You are on probation until further notice. Don't speak to anyone unless I give you permission. Go back to work until I figure something out. Last thing he needed was someone figuring out the Uchiha had been on it, and then he'd be dealing with 2 traitor genin. He'd leave the kid his denial. Naruto was infamous enough for his distaste for teens and people his own age that people would believe he didn't tell his teammates anything. Sasuke glared at him but did as instructed, making his way back to the group of curious workers. Sakura stepped forward to ask him something Kakashi couldn't hear from this distance, but Sasuke ignored her, picking up the stone he had dropped and resuming his work. What are you going to do? We need to leave, he replied. Tazuna will be fine since Gato is dead, and this takes priority. We need to go back to Konoha. I can't track him down with genin with me. I need you to go ahead and tell the Hokage. Are you sure? Pakun asked. You'd be turning the pup in. The hunter nin won't take it easy on him. I know, Kakashi sighed. The Hokage will want him alive though, and he'll be safer in Konoha. He'll be angry and miserable, but he'll be alive. We can figure things out from there. This was a nightmare. He'd only had the kid for a few months. How had Guy dealt with him for 3 years? Guy is going to be devastated, he whispered, feeling a bit sick. He'd failed his teacher, his pseudo-sister, and his friend. He'd also failed Naruto. His teaching had to be one of the things to drive the kid away. It certainly hadn't been enough to make him stay. One problem at a time. Pakun placed a paw on his leg in an attempt to ground him. Yeah, Kakashi adjusted the crutches. You head to Konoha. I'll follow with the genin as soon as I can. Pakun nodded and Kakashi dismissed the rest of the pack. He turned to limp back to the group. Time to break the news to Sakura and Tazuna. Chapter 24. Naruto bounced down the street, eyes unable to rest on one place as he took it all in. He'd landed on one of the smaller islands, so he ditched the boat, shoving it into some foliage near the shore to start looking for the public ferry that would continue taking him to the islands further into the land of water. He figured it would be safer to blend in with the civilians as much as possible, and an extra body on the ferry was less conspicuous than a boy sailing on his own. He'd hiked across the island to find the only town in sight and soon lost himself amongst the people. It was way smaller than Konoha, probably comparable to the town back in Wave back before Gato got his slimy hooks in it. It was small, but it was so full of life. Colorful stalls lined the streets, with some vendors calling out their wares but most speaking with what looked like friends or family, judging by the familiarity. Children ran through the streets, giggling as they weaved through the legs of the adults. There was the smell of fish, but it wasn't overwhelming, and the fresh, salty air hadn't left him since they'd boarded the boat to the land of waves. The best part was not a single person gave him a second glance. He blended in perfectly with the civilians around him, but Naruto knew his outfit wouldn't have been enough to fool anyone back in Konoha. Here, no one knew he was and no one cared. He was just one more person walking through the street, minding his own business. He felt a weight leave his shoulders. It wasn't the first time he had experienced it, but he cherished it every time. Every time he left Konoha he felt lighter, and every time he had to go back, he felt it settle back onto his shoulders. This time was different though. This time he didn't have to go back. He felt his throat tighten at the thought. It probably hadn't quite sank in yet since it had only been a few days, but Naruto desperately wanted it carry on forever. He reached the end of the street to finally see the port. He wasn't sure which of the docked boats the ferry was, so he walked up to one of the men sitting on a box nearby, cigarette hanging from his mouth. "Hi," he started, trying not to show his anxiety. He didn't like unknown strangers, in or out of Konoha. "Do you know what time the next ferry to the capital is?" The man took his time answering, looking Naruto up and down. He was older, around Tezuna's age. The stench of fish clung to him and his gray, scraggly beard stood out against weathered brown skin. Naruto resisted the urge to check his kunai. He'd stowed a few in his civilian outfit, but he wasn't used to not having a kunai pouch. He didn't think this man would attack him, but he had long learned not to rely on such instincts. It was always better to prepare for the worst-case scenario. "Lucky kid," the man suddenly grinned. "Leaves in 5. On with ya." Naruto blinked, following the man's pointed thumb to one of the larger vessels. "Thanks," he said, immediately stepping away from the man. He quickly walked up to the boat, encountering a bored young man standing by the ramp. Dirty blue overalls over a gray turtleneck with dark hair down to his shoulders, he looked the image of a local fishing lad. "One to the capital," Naruto requested. "Aren't ya a little young ta be travelin' yourself?" the man asked, his accent similar to the old man's. "I'm meeting my grandfather at the capital," Naruto replied easily, having come up with the story during his many days stuck on the boat. "My father died, so I have to move in with him, but he's too elderly to come to me, so I'm going to him. I can totally travel on my own, it's just a couple ferries." 12 was young for a civilian, so he had to make it seem like he was used to being treated like a little kid. 12 for a shinobi was nothing. He'd graduated and started missions when he was 9, and he knew Kakashi and Guy-sensei had started earlier. Civilians were so weird about age sometimes. "You don't sound like ya from round air," the man continued. "Is that a requirement for boarding the ferry?" Naruto snapped back, unable to hide his irritation. Why did he even care? "Calm down, lil guy." The man patted Naruto's head, and it took everything he had not to break his wrist. "Just curious about the new face. 300 ryo for the trip." Naruto shoved it at him, climbing onto the boat. This wasn't something he anticipated. On one hand, people didn't care who he was, but at the same time, he was supposed to be a 12-year-old civilian. Apparently, people cared about kids traveling on their own. It wouldn't change things for him, but he needed to keep his story straight. He was sure people would care less once he got to the capital. If it was anything like the Land of Fires, it would be too damn big for anyone to care about one kid. He found a free spot and hunkered down, ignoring the few people milling about. He hadn't asked how long the trip was, but he supposed that didn't really change much. He was stuck on the boat until they arrived there, and there was nothing he could do to speed things up. He clutched his bag to his chest, keeping the people in his line of sight as a horn sounded, and he felt the boat start to move. He'd managed to get to the second boat at least, which should keep throwing off his scent. Kakashi's nin dogs wouldn't be able to track him, but at the same time, it was a small island. They would be able to quickly guess that he'd taken the ferry to the capital. He tried to shake the negative thoughts. He was okay. He was getting further and further from Konoha, and soon he would be in the Land of Water capital, where he could get so lost that he would never be found. He could just become one of many, and it was everything he ever wanted. Just a little bit further to go. Wonderful form, Lee. The power of youth shines brightly within you. Guy-sensei. Tenten, your tanto technique puts all others to shame. So elegant. Thanks, sensei. Neji, your clan taijutsu is glorious. Your speed increases every day. Neji nodded at him. Now, we end with 20 laps around Konoha. Guy announced. Yes, Guy-sensei. Lee answered with enthusiasm, the other two genin quickly following him out of the training grounds. They were ready. Holding them back for the Chunin exams last year had been the correct decision, and his team had bloomed wonderfully. He had every confidence in his team and knew they would have done magnificently if he had entered them last year, but holding them back, allowing them to work on their skills and become even stronger, meant that they would be leagues above any other genin team who had graduated after them. The experience of regular missions alone would stand them in good stead when they were promoted to Chunin, and Guy was happy to send them off into the world, sound in the knowledge that they were as prepared as he could possibly prepare them to be. Had Naruto been placed on a team when he had been assigned to Guy, he wouldn't have hesitated to put forward his former apprentice. Naruto had been ready for the Chunin exams since his first year as a genin, but Guy had done the same with him as he had done for his genin team, holding him back only a year to give him the best possible chance. The issues that had come up each subsequent year had been out of his control, and he knew the Hokage had been deliberately holding Naruto back from his attempts at promotion. He did not know why, but he just had to have faith that their leader was doing it for Naruto's sake. He was still firmly of the opinion that Naruto was one of the best genin in the village, and the power of youth shone brightly within him. He was privileged to be able to claim he was one of Naruto's teachers. His student would reach every goal he set and accomplish whatever dream he desired. He knew not everyone in the village could see Naruto's hard work, and not all appreciated Naruto's refreshing direct approach, but Guy knew that it would not be forever. It was only a matter of time before everyone saw what he did, a wonderful young boy who worked hard, with a sharp wit and a kind heart. Kakashi may enter them into the Chunin exams this year. Naruto's teammates had only been out of the academy for a few short months, but Guy had heard nothing but wonderful things about Uchiha Sasuke, and he had seen Haruno Sakura working hard on her own in different training fields. Lee was quite taken with her but had not wanted to interrupt her training, so had vowed to win her over with hard work of his own. Guy was so proud of him. Kakashi was a fantastic teacher, so they would probably be ready for the Chunin exams, and his rival was very much of the school of, the best teacher is experience. So Guy had very little doubt about his entering of his genin team. The two recent academy graduates would also have Naruto in their corner. His student may still be struggling with the concept of teammates, but Guy knew Naruto could do anything he put his mind to. He would trust in their skills, and if it became too much for them, he would step in to protect them. He pretended to care little for other people, but Guy knew that was just a shield to protect himself from the harsh criticism of others. He wished Naruto would allow himself out of his shell a little more, but that sort of thing could not be forced. His student had already come so far from when he had first graduated, and Guy knew he would just continue to grow and flourish and bloom into the springtime of his youth. He couldn't wait to see his students in the Chunin exams. It would be an honor to see his team to compete against his rival's team too. He would have to speak with Kakashi when they returned from their mission. Kakashi's team had been granted their first C rank, but they should be back well before the exams. He could also see if Naruto wished to spar. He had not wanted to interfere with Kakashi's teachings, especially with how new the team was, but it had been months and they had even had a C rank. Surely it would not be overstepping to invite Naruto for a spar. He would have to ask his rival. He wanted to see how far Naruto had come with his own eyes. Naruto had informed him of his lessons with Hayate to master the Uzumaki clan blades he had received in the capital. Genma had also informed him of Naruto's new affinity for futon after having heard from Asuma at one of the bars. Naruto had picked up so many wonderful skills since he had left Guy's care, and he could not wait to see them. His taijutsu would be something to behold. He could not stand still anymore. He raced off in the direction of his students. He could not slack off either. He would have to keep training hard and challenging himself so he may pose not only a challenge to his beloved rival, but also to his wonderful student. He eagerly anticipated their return. Sakura walked just behind her teacher, following the dirt road back home. It felt like it had been both ages and no time at all since they were last on this road going to the land of waves. Her first C rank had not gone at all like she'd been expecting. It had been terrifying at first, between the demon brothers and Zabuza, but it had ended anticlimactically, with someone taking out Gato without them. They'd spent a few days just helping out with the bridge building and making sure no leftover thugs decided to try their luck, but nothing had really happened. Then Naruto's clone had popped and everything had gone sideways. She hadn't really understood Kakashi-sensei at first when he'd told her what happened. She'd been convinced that he was just trying to get out of the boring bridge work, but she'd never seen Kakashi-sensei so serious before. It started to sink in when they'd told Tazuna-san that they had to leave. It became real when they'd started their journey back to Konoha without Naruto. Sakura knew about missing Nin. It was impossible not to know as a kunoichi, and the bingo book was full of them. There had been a few lectures about them back at the academy, so Sakura also knew that they were not as uncommon as people like to believe. At the same time, they had been an abstract concept. She knew they were criminals that had abandoned their village, but they were from other villages or before her time. Defecting from the village was a well-known crime, but she'd never dreamed that someone would actually do it. She couldn't even fathom doing something like that. Her family and her team and her friends were in Konoha. Why would anyone ever want to leave? She had never imagined that it could be someone she knew. She knew Naruto hadn't gotten on with the villagers, but she didn't think it was enough to make him leave. Maybe if he was a bit less abrasive and made an effort, things would have been better and he wouldn't have felt like he had to leave. At the same time, there was something about Naruto that Sakura knew she was missing. He was hard to get along with, but people's reaction to him had always seemed a bit extreme. She's seen it on D ranks and had never managed to figure it out. What was going to happen? Naruto was technically a criminal now? But what if he had a really good reason to leave? Naruto had never liked her, but he was still her teammate. She wanted him to acknowledge her, but he couldn't do that if he was out of the village or in jail. There had to be more to this. This couldn't be the way things were from now on. They were moving quicker than they had when they'd had Tazuna-san, but it wasn't up to speed with a normal shinobi pace, not with Kakashi-sensei's condition. They had set a brutal pace when they'd first reached the Land of Fire, but they hadn't been able to maintain it. He'd left his crutches back in the Land of Waves, and Sakura knew that he'd had to have had an unhealthy amount of soldier pills at this point. Sasuke-kun hadn't said anything since they'd left the Land of Waves, but neither had Kakashi-sensei, really. There was some weird sort of tension between them. They hadn't shared a single word since their discussion after Naruto's clone popped, not even when they'd stopped to camp for a few brief hours. Sasuke-kun had been sullen and didn't respond to Sakura when she'd tried to break the uncomfortable silence. That in itself wasn't that unusual, as Sasuke-kun was the strong, silent type, but there was just something off about him. Sakura had been watching him for years, and while she knew there was a lot about Sasuke-kun that she still had to learn, she knew when something wasn't right. She wondered how he felt about Naruto's departure. They had been training partners and had known each other for what must be a while now. He had to be affected by Naruto leaving. She tried to imagine what it would feel like if Ino left the village, and it was horrible. It would feel like a hole in her life that she wouldn't be able to fill. It would also feel like a stab to the heart. Ino would have chosen to leave her. Naruto chose to leave them. He didn't think his team was worth sticking around for, and that hurt a lot more than Sakura had expected. She had put in so much effort, had taken his harsh criticisms and abrasive comments and had turned them into motivation and was actually seeing results, and Naruto wouldn't even be around to see it. Not that she needed his approval, but she wanted to at least prove him wrong. Maybe even knock him on his backside just once to see his face. The team felt wrong without him. What's going to happen? She asked, unable to keep turning things over alone in her own head. She was driving herself nuts. To Naruto, I mean. The Hokage will send shinobi to get him back, Kakashi-sensei answered shortly. Sakura could see the sweat on the exposed parts of his face. He had been pushing himself so much, she wondered what would happen to him when they got to Konoha and the adrenaline and soldier pills wore off. Then what happens? I don't know, Kakashi-sensei replied, but there was a hesitation. That would be for the Hokage to decide. He was lying and Sakura didn't like it. Kakashi-sensei hadn't been acting like himself since Naruto's clone disappeared, and there hadn't even been a glimpse of his orange book. Naruto was gone and Kakashi-sensei was all wrong, and Sasuke-kun was super down in the dumps, and Sakura felt like things would never be normal again. It didn't feel like her team anymore. She'd always felt like the odd one out, but she'd take that feeling over what was happening now. He'll be chained to the village forever if they don't kill him, Sasuke-kun finally spoke up. He's just a genin though, Sakura pointed out. Why would they care so much? Defecting from the village is a crime, no matter the rank, Kakashi-sensei cut in harshly. We know the village has it out for Naruto, Sasuke-kun snapped back. They don't want him there and they don't want him to leave. It's so fucking stupid. I suggest you keep your opinions to yourself when we get back to the village. Kakashi-sensei actually stopped in the middle of the road to glare at Sasuke-kun. You're on thin ice as it is, and the last thing we need is you being arrested too. Why would Sasuke-kun be arrested? Sakura tried to dampen the alarm that shot through her, her pulse skyrocketing. What had happened? Sasuke-kun couldn't be arrested. Why would Sasuke-kun be arrested? She blurted out, her wide-eyed gaze switching between the pair desperately. Don't worry about it, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei blew her off and she couldn't help but snap. Don't worry about it, she snarled, stopping dead in the middle of the road. My teammate is gone. He has defected and no one will tell me how or why or even talk about it. You and Sasuke obviously know something but you won't tell me. I'm a member of this team too and I am fed up of you brushing me aside like I'm stupid or I can't handle it. Naruto is difficult and grumpy and condescending and an amazing shinobi and he's my teammate. I deserve to know things too. She roughly wiped away the tears as she glared at the pair. It wasn't just Naruto who looked down on her, they all did, even Kakashi-sensei. She knew she was the weakest but she was still a member of this team and should be treated as such. She didn't always know if it was because she was behind them in training or if she preferred books or if she was a girl but she was sick of them treating her like she wasn't worth a thought. She put in as much effort as the boys and while yes, she wasn't at the same level yet, it should still be recognized and acknowledged. She tried her damn hardest and right now, she didn't care if that was enough for them. It was enough for her. Sorry, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei apologized. I didn't realize. Why would you? She spat, her anger driving her words. You barely acknowledge me unless it's to send me running or on AD rank. I don't matter as much as the boys. She didn't know how long this had been building and she didn't know why it was coming out now. There were much more important things, like getting back to Konoha and Naruto leaving, but she couldn't help it. She had this well of anger and spite and hurt and she didn't know what to do with it. That's not true, Kakashi-sensei insisted. You matter too, Sakura. She just couldn't bring herself to believe him. Whatever, she swallowed the lump in her throat. We don't have time for this. We need to get back to the village. She couldn't deal with this right now. This was bigger than something that could be figured out in the middle of a dusty road with one of her teammates missing. They would deal with this whole Naruto situation first and see what happened, but she knew things couldn't continue like this. She was a part of this team and it was about time they all started acting like it. Team 7 have just returned. Why did you feel the need to report this? Uzumaki Naruto did not return with them. A pause. What is his status? They are trying to keep it quiet but there is word that he has defected from the village. The Hokage has sent the Anbu out. Has he defected to another village? Unknown at this time. The Uchiha? He returned unharmed. What is Team 7's likelihood of entering the Chunin exams? Low. They are down to a 2-person team and it is unlikely that they will be entered upon retrieval of Uzumaki Naruto. They may add a member of the Genin Corps to allow Uchiha Sasuke to sit the exam but with only a couple of weeks until the participants start to arrive, they will not qualify. So Uchiha Sasuke will not be participating in the Chunin exams. No, Master. This may change my plans. Will the attack still go ahead? I have already done away with the case cage and prepared Suna for the battle. It will weaken Konoha even if we will need to access the Uchiha by another avenue. It may also provide the distraction and privacy I need to gift the boy the seal. What do you need me to do? Approach the boy. Begin to plant the seed in his mind. His teammate has left the village which may have an effect on him. We must try to lure him willingly. Of course, Master. Inform me of new developments in regard to Uzumaki Naruto. He may not be as valuable as the Uchiha but the Kyuubi would be an asset we cannot dismiss. The Akatsuki may already know he left the village. Yes, Master. Another pause. You have done well. Your time in Konoha will end with the attack so gather as much information as you are able. Do not disappoint me. Of course, Master. The summoned snake burst in a cloud of smoke, ending the correspondence. Kabuto pushed his glasses back into place as he rose from his seat. He could not fail his master. He needed to speak to Uchiha Sasuke and get to the bottom of the mystery of Uzumaki Naruto's disappearance before the Chunin exams and Konoha's downfall began. And that concludes part 4 of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed An Emperor's Youth, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Red Ninja Last 19, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.